Chapter 9:37. What kind of eyes were those? They were as vast as the stars, making people subconsciously sink into them and unable to extricate themselves. If one's cultivation was weak, they would be directly immersed in them and would not be able to control themselves. Tang Zheng suddenly remembered that the eyes of the unknown creature in the crystal had many similarities with this woman. Could it be that this was a characteristic of the members of that world? He did not know the answer, but he realized that the situation had become troublesome. He reminded Tian Chanzi, be careful of her. The Great Lord sneered. It's too late. Consecrator, kill these two. Consecrator. Tang Zheng was shocked. The Azure Dragon Palace Hall had a total of 3 consecrators. Besides the Elder Angler and the fair-faced Flying Dragon, there was also the most mysterious female consecrator. It was actually this person. Li Xiaotian had only heard of her name, but had never seen her before. As far as she knew, even her master, Granny Li, had never seen her before. No one would have thought that this person was actually in the cliff cave behind the Azure Dragon Palace Hall, and was even sealed in a crystal. Many questions appeared in Tang Zheng's mind. Since this person was a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Palace Hall, could it be that she was not a person from another world? But how could she merge into the crystal and absorb the energy of the crystal in an instant? No one gave him an answer. In a story, the female consecrator's eyes flashed coldly, and she was already attacking the two. Retreat! Tian Chanzi suddenly shouted. His senses were sharper than Tang Zheng's, so he had already realized how powerful this person was. Tang Zheng had a telepathic connection, so he turned around and ran, Tian Chanzi bringing up the rear. Whoosh! The two returned to the dark cave one after the other, and ran out of the cave as fast as lightning. The sound of the wind whistling behind them was very clear that the female consecrator was not far behind them. You go first. Tian Chanzi pushed Tang Zheng and turned around to face the female consecrator. Tang Zheng's heart trembled, and he subconsciously shouted, Tian Chanzi, be careful. He did not insist on staying. Since this female consecrator was so powerful, he had to let the Empyrean fairy deal with her. Therefore, he tried his best to escape from the cave and flew to the peak of the mountain on his sword. Immediately, he heard a loud rumbling sound behind him. It was obvious that Tian Chanzi was fighting with the female consecrator. Tian Chanzi, you have to hold on. Tang Zheng prayed silently. He passed through the fog and saw the figure on the mountain peak. He shouted, Fu Yao, go, and save Tian Chanzi. Whoosh! The Empyrean fairy swooped down and flew past Tang Zheng, disappearing into the mist. The others asked in panic, what's going on down there? Tang Zheng landed on the mountain peak. Seeing everyone's anxious expression, he hurriedly comforted them. Don't worry, everything is under control. However, his heart was beating like a drum. That female consecrator was too hard to fathom. He did not know who was stronger between her and the Empyrean fairy. Boom, boom, boom. Loud noises came from below. The fog rolled, and the mountain peak trembled. The sound of fighting was very fierce. Suddenly, a few figures rushed out of the fog. The first one was Tian Chanzi. He looked a little embarrassed and had several wounds on his body. Tang Zheng was shocked. Tian Chanzi was already in the first tier of the semi-god realm, but he still looked so embarrassed. It was obvious how terrifying this female consecrator was. However, Tian Chanzi was not seriously injured, which was a blessing in disguise. The Empyrean fairy and the female consecrator rushed out of the fog together. The fog had been completely dispelled, as if it had been cut into pieces by thousands of swords. Seeing the battle between the two of them, the others couldn't help sucking in a cold breath. The two of them were completely floating in the air, and every move they made was extremely fierce. Even though they were very far away, there was a suffocating feeling that made it hard for them to breathe. The Empyrean fairy's magic weapon was a divine weapon, while the female consecrator had a string of bells on the back of her hand. When she shook her arm, the bells wouldn't stop ringing. The sound of the bells seemed to be magical. As soon as the demonic sound entered their ears, they felt their bodies become light, as if their souls were about to leave their bodies. Everyone, be careful of the demonic sound of the bells. Tang Zheng quickly calmed down and reminded them anxiously. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed. They felt like their hearts were swaying, and they almost lost their minds. Immediately, everyone felt the power of the bells. As the bells shook, the crisp sound spread between heaven and earth. Circles of ripples swept toward the Empyrean fairy like waves after waves. The Empyrean fairy looked serious. Since she woke up, this was the first time she faced a threat. Her opponent's bells were also divine weapons. The key was that her opponent's strength was slightly higher than the 100 Faces Star Sovereign. For the time being, the Empyrean fairy couldn't determine a winner. The two sides were in a deadlock. Seeing the two fighting fiercely, Tang Zheng's thoughts ran wild. He glanced down the cliff and happened to see the Lord standing at the entrance of the cave, looking up at the battle in mid-air. Tian Chanzi, let's deal with the Lord, Tang Zheng suggested. Tian Chanzi was also watching the fierce battle without blinking. In his mind, he recalled his thrilling battle just now. He almost died at the hands of the female consecrator, Tang Zheng. He couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. Where did this female consecrator come from? How could she be so powerful? She was also in the divine transformation realm. The strangest thing was that she was also a cultivator. The Azure Dragon Palace had always regarded cultivators as their mortal enemy. Why would they have a cultivator as a consecrator? There were too many contradictions, and he couldn't figure it out. After hearing Tang Zheng's reminder, Tian Chanzi immediately looked at the Lord standing at the entrance of the cave from afar. His killing intent surged. Whoosh! He turned into an afterimage, disappeared, and swooped down at the Lord. The Lord's expression changed when he heard the sound of something breaking through the air and the figure getting bigger and bigger. Tian Chanzi was still in midair when he slashed down with his sword. Only this sword was left in the world. The sword light flashed, and the sword chi was thousands of rays. In an instant, it fell at the entrance of the cave. Panic flashed in the Lord's eyes. He didn't dare to fight back, but he didn't retreat into the cave. Instead, he jumped off the cliff. Boom! With a loud noise, the entrance of the cave collapsed and turned into a pile of ruins. It buried the entrance and splashed up smoke and dust. The High Lord fell down quickly. A strong wind blew past his ears, causing his clothes to flutter in the wind. He suddenly raised his head to look, just in time to see Heaven Monk chasing after him like a shadow. The Lord didn't have the ability to fly, so he was at a disadvantage when facing Tian Chanzi. The Lord's toes touched the cliff, and the momentum of his fall was reduced sharply. He finally stabilized his body. He didn't know when, but there was a long sword in his hand. With a shake of the sword, he greeted Tian Chanzi, who was falling from the sky. Tang Zheng and others had only seen him use non-phase method before, but they had never seen him use swordsmanship. At this moment, seeing this swordsmanship, Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi's pupils shrank at the same time. They were all masters of swordsmanship, so they judged the power of this swordsmanship at a glance. Ding! With a crisp sound, the sword in Tian Chanzi's hand and the sword in the Lord's hand were against each other. The two swords bent back involuntarily and bounced back. Clang! Both of them flew backwards, but Heaven Monk only took a step back before stopping. Then a sword came from the west, Heaven flying immortal. The Lord's sword flashed, and the sword flowers filled the sky. In an instant, they intertwined into a sword light. Kacha! The sword light dissipated, and the Heaven flying immortal broke all of the Lord's swordsmanship. It was extremely simple. Puff! With a flash of blood, the tip of the sword directly pierced the Lord's chest. Blood splashed. The Lord was quick-witted and jumped off the cliff directly, not letting the long sword pierce his chest too much. He was lucky to escape, but his eyes flashed with deep sadness. Once non-phase method was useless, he couldn't do anything to Tian Chanzi. Tian Chanzi didn't let him go. He chased after him, and the two fell off the cliff quickly. Every once in a while, the High Lord would stomp on the walls of the cliff to slow down his fall. In the air, the female consecrator and the mysterious lady of the 9 heavens were locked in a fierce battle. When they suddenly saw this scene, they turned pale with fright. They immediately abandoned the mysterious Lady of the Nine Heavens and turned to rush towards the Heaven Monk in an attempt to save the High Lord. Tian Chanzi suddenly felt a cold, murderous aura behind him. He was shocked. The magical sound of the bell had poured into his ears. His soul suddenly trembled, and his movements subconsciously slowed down a bit. While he was at a loss of what to do, a shooting sun arrow flew over from afar. The female consecrator's eyes turned and coldly stared at Tang Zheng, who was standing in the distance. Her eyes were cold. Her jade hand quickly reached out, and in a flash, she firmly grabbed the shooting sun arrow. Suddenly, she was pushed forward a few steps by the shooting sun arrow. She quickly stabilized her body and turned around, firmly locking on to Tang Zheng. "Go to hell." She softly said these two words. With a wave of her hand, the shooting sun arrow flew towards Tang Zheng. Its speed was not inferior to the previous one. Tang Zheng knew the power of the shooting sun arrow and quickly took out the holy armor shield. Clang! With a crisp sound, the shooting sun arrow fiercely hit the holy armor shield. Tang Zheng felt as if he was hit by a high-speed train. He quickly retreated. His arm was numb, and the holy armor shield flew out of his hand. Fortunately, the holy armor shield was a heaven-grade treasure. Although the shooting sun arrow was a sacred tool, it was not used with the heaven-shocking bow, so its power was greatly reduced. Otherwise, the holy armor shield would not be intact. Tang Zheng was well aware of this, so he immediately stabilized his body and picked up the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrow in midair, afraid that his two treasures would fall off the cliff and disappear without a trace. The female consecrator's pupils constricted. She was extremely dissatisfied with the result, but the High Lord was in danger. She could not care less about Tang Zheng, so she abandoned Tang Zheng without hesitation and turned to attack Tian Chanzi, trying to save the High Lord. The High Lord was lucky enough to escape from Tian Chanzi's hands and gasped for breath. Tian Chanzi dodged from afar. Only then did he feel the overwhelming killing intent behind him, causing him to not dare to advance rashly. With this female consecrator, the High Lord had reversed the situation and was almost invincible. The female consecrator stood beside the High Lord and looked at the group of people expressionlessly. Empyrean Fairy and the others also subconsciously stopped their attacks. The short battle had already allowed them to have a rough understanding of each other's strength, and they understood that they would not be able to defeat each other in a short period of time. "Who exactly are you?" Empyrean Fairy was extremely curious about this woman who was on par with her. The female consecrator said expressionlessly, "Azure Dragon Palace's consecrator, Xian Yin. Why are you helping the Azure Dragon Palace? You are a warrior. Why are you helping the enemy?" Tang Zheng asked first. Chapter 9:38. Facing Tang Zheng's question, Xian Yin remained indifferent and coldly replied, "Although I am a cultivator, I am not the same as you." "What do you mean by that?" Tang Zheng was puzzled. "Because I am not a cultivator from this world, I am naturally different from you. Why can't I be your enemy?" Xian Yin said. These words were like a clap of thunder, causing everyone to be dumbstruck. Tang Zheng's head trembled, and he immediately asked, "If you're not a cultivator from this world, then which world are you from?" He had previously guessed that Xian Yin was from another world, but he had later denied it. Now that he heard this answer, all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. It turned out that he had guessed correctly. Since she was not from this world, it was possible for her to help anyone. However, why did she become a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Palace? Xian Yin swept his gaze across, as if he had seen through Tang Zheng's thoughts, and directly said, "Back then, New Era was only able to build the Azure Dragon Palace with my help. Do you think there's a problem with me being a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Palace? You helped New Era build the Azure Dragon Palace?" This was definitely explosive news. Everyone was shocked, and at the same time, they found it inconceivable. But without any doubt, she asked. This was definitely not her bragging. A light flashed across Tang Zheng's eyes as he came to a realization. "I understand. I have always been very suspicious about what kind of ability New Era had to be able to expel all the cultivators. But now I finally understand he did not rely on his own strength. I'm afraid you are the key factor. Xianyin looked at him with admiration and said, "You are really smart. You can actually rely on fragmented information to completely understand the truth." "Then why did you do it?" Tang Zheng asked angrily. "Do you know how cruel this is to our world and even to those cultivators?" The reason why this world became a small world was closely related to the expulsion of cultivators. If there were cultivators, then this world would not have been demoted to a small world, and there would not have been any possibility of destruction. Xianyin said coldly, "This is not my world. Why should I be merciful to this world? But what's in it for you?" Tang Zheng was unwilling to give up. He would not give up until he got to the bottom of the matter. Xianyin smiled coldly. "Of course it's beneficial to me, but it's even more beneficial to my world. How can you guess the mysteries behind it? Then where exactly are you from?" Seeing that the other party was deliberately mystifying, Tang Zheng asked again. "The other world, which is what you call the heavens beyond heaven," Xianyin said proudly. She was obviously very proud of the world she lived in. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. The realm beyond heaven was infamous. No one would have thought that someone from the realm beyond heaven would appear in this world. But now that Xianyin had admitted it herself, everyone realized that the situation had become very complicated. Tang Zheng was anxious. This meant that the unknown creature was also from the sky beyond heaven. He gradually had a very bad premonition. He muttered to himself irresolutely, "You said that doing this would bring great benefits to your world, and you purposely banished the other practitioners to the sky beyond heaven. Could this be your goal? You need those practitioners?" Xianyin was slightly startled. She said in surprise, "You're really smart. Although I don't know you, from your performance, you're definitely one of the best of the younger generation in this world." "I don't need your praise," Tang Zheng said unhappily. "I just want to know your ultimate goal. What will you do to those expelled practitioners? Also, what benefits will this bring to your world?" Xianyin sneered. "You want me to answer your questions? Impossible." Tang Zheng flew into a rage. "There are so many of us. Do you think you can escape? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll have no choice but to use this soul-searching book. Then all the answers will be easily solved. Umph. The only one here who can threaten me is her." Xianyin snorted disdainfully. She pointed at the Empyrean fairy and said confidently, "But if she wants to stop me, it's impossible." Tang Zheng glanced at the Empyrean fairy. Seeing that she didn't refute this, it meant that Xianyin was telling the truth. If she wanted to leave, no one here could stop her. A high elder of the Azure Dragon Palace actually turned the situation around. Tang Zheng was very unwilling to accept this. Of course, it wasn't that he didn't gain anything. At least he now knew that the Azure Dragon Palace could do such a shocking thing with the help of Xianyin from the sky beyond sky. But this was all history. What was more important was Xianyin's purpose for doing all this. What was this unspeakable purpose? Would it still threaten this world? This was what Tang Zheng was most concerned about. The Empyrean fairy was silent for a while. Then she stepped forward and closed the distance between her and Xianyin. Her red lips moved slightly. "Xianyin, if you leave alone, I may not be able to do anything. But you're bringing a burden with you. Do you think you have an absolute chance of winning?" Of course, this burden was referring to the Great Lord. When the Great Lord heard this, his face under the mask turned red. Even his neck turned red. His eyes were burning with anger, but he was also helpless. With the Empyrean fairy's strength, she was indeed qualified to say this. He couldn't refute it at all. Tang Zheng keenly sensed the Great Lord's embarrassment. He laughed mockingly. "Great Lord, you've always been hiding behind a mask and not showing your true face. You're like a rat hiding in the sewers. You can only watch from the shadows and live forever in the dark corners." The Great Lord was ridiculed by the Empyrean fairy. He couldn't refute, but when he heard Tang Zheng's sarcastic words, he was furious. He clenched his fists so tightly that blue veins popped out. He couldn't wait to pounce on Tang Zheng and kill him. Tang Zheng naturally understood his thoughts. So he deliberately said these words to provoke him so that he would lose his mind and take off the mask. He was very curious about the face under the mask. The great lord took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He looked meaningfully at Tang Zheng and said, "You're really a smart person. You actually want to use this kind of method to provoke me. Unfortunately, I've long passed that age. How could I fall for your trick?" Tang Zheng secretly sighed. His plan had failed. The great lord was after all the master of the Azure Dragon Hall. He had too many outstanding aspects. This kind of small trick was indeed difficult to use. The great lord looked at Tang Zheng and the others with ridicule. "I won't drag down Sir Consecrator. Besides, do you really think that you can defeat my Azure Dragon Hall just by destroying this place? Wishful thinking. If the Azure Dragon Hall was really so easily defeated, then it would have vanished into thin air for hundreds of years." Tang Zheng suddenly said, "It said that the Azure Dragon Hall has a lot of people, but this time I only saw a few people. Where did the others go?" "Haha, you finally learned to be smart and asked a crucial question. But why should I tell you?" The great lord laughed sinisterly. "All the answers will naturally be revealed once I capture you. You don't have that ability." The great lord retorted, subconsciously hiding behind Xianyin. A dignified great lord of a generation hiding behind a woman. If news of this got out, wouldn't people laugh their heads off? The great lord, of course, knew that this kind of influence was extremely bad, but in order to save his life, he decided to ignore it. "Kill!" Suddenly, a sharp voice came from the Empyrean fairy's throat. Her figure flashed as she attacked Xianyin. Ever since the Empyrean fairy had awakened, this was the first time her killing intent had been aroused. Even when she faced the Hundred Faces Star-Lord, she didn't have such a strong killing intent. That was because she felt a strong sense of danger from Xianyin's words. This wasn't just for her, but for the entire world. In the face of external aggression, the Empyrean fairy subconsciously regarded herself as the master of this world. Precisely because of this, she was especially angry at the Azure Dragon Hall, who colluded with Xianyin. She swept a glance at the great lord, full of intense, killing intent. It was as sharp as a knife, causing the great lord to subconsciously avoid her gaze. The Empyrean fairy's attack was like a thunderbolt, powerful and powerful. The stately painting suddenly expanded like a curtain, covering the sky and covering everyone's heads. It was dark. The only thing that could be seen was the painting. The mountains and lakes on the painting became lifelike and rapidly expanded, as if they were identical to the real thing. A boundless power was emitted from the stately painting. This time there were no mountains, no torrents, no wind, and no rain, but the feeling it gave off was even more oppressive and terrifying. This power was formless, yet pervasive. Everyone present could feel it. As long as one was under the stately painting that covered the sky, no one could escape. However, the two groups of people felt completely different. Tang Zheng and the others didn't feel too uncomfortable. Although they felt the power of this power, it didn't attack them. Xianyin and the Great Lord felt completely different. The power attacked them from all directions, from top to bottom, from front to back, from left to right. The look in their eyes changed. This was a killing move, completely incomparable to the previous attack. Xianyin gritted her teeth and asked, "What kind of power is this?" "The primordial power." The Empyrean fairy squeezed these 4 words out of her teeth. Her expression was unprecedentedly focused and dignified. The primitive force was a force hidden in the map of mountains and rivers of the gods and Vale. This magic treasure was refined by a supreme master in ancient times. It encompassed the heavens and earth, mountains and rivers, and was almost identical to the real world. However, the root of all this was the primordial power. It was a mysterious power that existed between heaven and earth. Ordinary people couldn't see it at all, let alone extract it and use it as a means of attack. However, the Supreme Master did it. This gave the stately painting great power. However, it was not easy to activate the primordial power in the stately painting. It consumed a lot of power, and it also required the caster's strength. If it wasn't a matter of life and death, she would never use it easily. Just like in the previous dangerous battle, she didn't activate the primordial power. At this moment, she was really angry. She was angry at Xian and the Great Lord, so she didn't hesitate to use this killing move to inflict serious damage on them. Chapter 9:39. Xian was from the Outland, so she did not know much about the Chaos Force. However, this did not stop her from seeing how powerful this force was. Therefore, Xian and the Lord felt threatened at the same time, and both of them used everything they had. Asterisk ring ring ring. Asterisk a series of sounds came from the bell in Xian's hand. The bell glowed with a bronze yellow light and intertwined around her body. Gradually, it formed a huge bell that enveloped her. The sound of the bell became louder and louder. The light became thicker and thicker. It was as if a huge bell was protecting her. The Lord did not have divine powers like Xian. He stabbed the sword in his hand. Rays of sword light intertwined and floated above his head. Asterisk boom boom. Asterisk the chaos force finally fell. The rocks on the cliff shattered and fell to the ground, turning into dust. The bell formed by the light trembled. The sound of the bell became louder and louder. It was resisting the chaos force. Asterisk crack. Asterisk the sword light above the Lord's head did not hold on for long. It collapsed like a piece of rotten wood. Asterisk pft. Asterisk he spat out a mouthful of blood. The rocks under his feet shattered, and he fell down the cliff. Seeing this, Xian roared, "Break!" The light of the bell shone brightly, and the sound became like thunder. Asterisk crack. Asterisk a crack appeared on the bell. A beam of yellow light shot into the sky from the opening and collided with the painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of Vale. The mountain river map shook violently, and the chaos force was greatly reduced. The Empyrean fairy's eyes turned cold. She quickly channeled her inner energy. Asterisk pft. Asterisk Xian spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face turned pale. The crack on the bell grew bigger, and the light dimmed. At the same time, the chaos force weakened. The Empyrean fairy felt as if her energy had been sucked out of her body. Most of the vital energy in her body was depleted. She became a little sluggish. Xian took this opportunity to fly down. She grabbed the Lord who was falling at a high speed. Holding the broken bell in one hand, she fell down the cliff. The Empyrean fairy had won this battle. Although she had used up a lot of vital energy, she was not injured. In order to save the High Lord, Xian did not hesitate to forcefully activate her magic treasure. In the end, her magic treasure was damaged, and she was injured and vomited blood. When Tangjung saw that the Empyrean fairy was on the verge of collapsing, he immediately rushed over to support her. With her soft body in his arms, he didn't have a trace of lust and asked with concern, "How are you?" The Empyrean fairy shook her head and said, "Chase after them quickly. If we let them escape this time, it won't be so easy to find them again." "Tian Chanzi, go after him," Tangjung shouted. One should not pursue a cornered enemy. However, this group of people were not cornered enemies, but ferocious tigers. Once the tigers returned to the mountains, there would be no end of trouble. Tian Chanzi dived down the cliff, while Tangjung helped Empyrean Fairy to the top of the mountain. He handed her over to Wu Junshan and the others, and asked them to take good care of her. "You have to be careful, too." Seeing that Tangjung was about to chase after them, they hurriedly warned him. The scene just now had really taught them a vivid lesson. This was the strength of the strong practitioners. Their fighting strength was indeed extraordinary. They were far from being able to compare with them. In fact, they couldn't even compare with their own son. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu were deeply moved. Looking at the figure chasing down the cliff, the two of them anxiously looked at each other. There were too many inexplicable feelings in their eyes. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi flew to the bottom of the cliff one after another. From afar, they saw the figures of Xianyin and the High Lord. The High Lord did not know how to fly, so he seriously dragged Xianyin down. He was caught by Xianyin and fell down awkwardly. "Stop!" Tian Chanzi roared and chopped down with the sword in his hand. From the top to the bottom, the power was terrifying. Xianyin looked up and happened to see that the sword light was about to fall on her head. Her expression darkened as she shook the broken bell. In an instant, A yellow light soared into the sky from the bell. This yellow light was much weaker than before. Its power was sharply reduced, but met the sword light head-on. Boom! The two lights collided and exploded. The sky became incomparably gorgeous. The cliff was hit by the light, and rocks flew everywhere. A large part of it collapsed. The two of them were actually evenly matched in this exchange. Everyone was shocked. Xian Yin's face became more and more gloomy. The High Lord couldn't help but twitch his mouth. In an instant, the Empyrean fairy had turned the situation around. The High Lord was flustered and exasperated, but there was nothing he could do. Tian Chanzi and Tang Zheng were overjoyed. They originally thought that Xian Yin was more powerful, but it seemed that they had overestimated her. Her injuries were not light, and her strength had been greatly reduced. Unexpectedly, she was almost on par with Tian Chanzi. Tang Zheng calmed down and said in a low voice, "Tian Chanzi, this is a rare opportunity. Fu Yao is no longer able to fight against her. It's up to us now." Tian Chanzi nodded happily. "You're right. We have to use all our strength to keep them here." After saying that, he increased his speed and was already behind Xian Yin. Xian Yin waved her delicate hand, and the bell flew to her head. It kept shaking, and the demonic sound entered people's ears, causing their minds to sway. Tian Chanzi's face darkened, and he actually stopped. This demonic sound was very different from before. It was indeed powerful, causing people's minds to sway and almost lose their minds. It was precisely this short delay that allowed Xian Yin and Tian Chanzi to pull apart the distance between them. They could see the bottom of the cliff very clearly. The lush forest was dark. If they fell into it, it would be easier for them to hide and escape. Tang Zheng was extremely anxious. He did not care about Tian Chanzi's absent-mindedness and chased after them. In an instant, he closed the distance between him and Xian Yin. Holding the heaven-shocking bow in his hand, the shooting sun arrow slid past his fingertips and shot towards them with a shocking sound. Insignificant skill. Xian Yin snorted in disdain. Although her strength had temporarily decreased, she still did not put Tang Zheng in her eyes. She did not even bother to use a magic treasure. She pointed her finger in the air, and a vast and mighty power surged out. The shooting sun arrow instantly stopped in midair. It was forcibly blocked by this force. But before Xian Yin could be happy, he realized that Tang Zheng's figure was actually right in front of him. This person is really not afraid of death. Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish. The bell shone brightly, releasing a soul-stirring power, and the ringing sound enveloped Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng's eyes became sluggish for a moment. Then he regained his senses and burst out with a burst of shock. He felt that there was something strange in his mind, but after circulating his innate qi, he regained his composure. He finally understood one of the powerful aspects of Xian Yin. She not only attacked the physical body, but also the mind. That bronze-yellow light attacked the physical body, while Ding Ling Ling's demonic sound attacked the mind. The most terrifying thing was that this demonic sound was all-pervasive, making it impossible for people to guard against it. He also finally understood why Tian Chanzi was absent-minded earlier. It turned out that it was the influence of the demonic sound. But why didn't he have much of a reaction? He guessed that it was because he did not have the inner demons. Just as this thought appeared, the voice of the inner demons rang out. "Young man, you're right. This woman's bell can indeed attack a person's mind. But it's too child's play. It can't be compared to mine." Chiyu scoffed and said, "You're pushing yourself to the top. This woman is not simple. Visitors from the sky beyond heaven have never appeared in our time. Perhaps they have discovered our world, so they sent people to explore it, just like how we sent people to explore the sky beyond heaven. Their goal is obviously more aggressive than ours. Otherwise, why would she use tricks to expel all the cultivators to the sky beyond heaven?" The inner demons retorted, "That's natural." Chiyu did not object. "Then do you know what their goal is?" "Do you know?" The inner demons asked. "I don't know for now, but as long as we catch her, we will know." Tang Zheng's heart moved, and he hurriedly asked, "Do you have a way to catch her?" "Of course." Chi was full of confidence. The inner demons disdainfully said, "No matter how strong you are, this woman's attack is a mental attack. Your methods may not work." Who said they're useless? Chi said, unconvinced. "Then let's have a competition and see whose methods are more useful." The inner demons argued. "Let's have a competition. Who's afraid of who? We'll each use our own methods and see whose methods are more effective." Chi said angrily, "Tang Zheng, I'll teach you a set of leg techniques. This is my own creation, called the heaven-splitting leg." What heaven-splitting leg? Such a flashy name. It's definitely not much. The inner demons scoffed. "Tang Zheng, I'll teach you a mental attack technique called the mind manipulation technique." Tang Zheng was secretly delighted. As the saying goes, when the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. Chi Yu and the inner demons did not see eye to eye and fought each other, which benefited him. These two were not ordinary people, and the techniques that leaked out from under their fingernails were not common either. "Time is of the essence. Hurry up and tell me what to do," Tang Zheng purposely urged. "I'll tell you. Why don't you evaluate who's stronger?" In a split second, two streaks of light appeared in Tang Zheng's mind, and two sets of cultivation techniques immediately appeared in his mind. He was ecstatic. These two sets of cultivation techniques were definitely very powerful. Although he had only taken a rough look, he was already shocked by these two sets of cultivation techniques. The heaven-splitting leg was a perfect set of leg techniques. It focused on mobilizing the strength of the legs and strengthening the strength of the legs. Tang Zheng had already cultivated the chaotic Vajra spell, and his entire body was as tough as steel, so the heaven-splitting technique was twice the result with half the effort. When his mind moved, an image appeared in his mind, and one move after another automatically evolved. This set of leg techniques was actually a quick method. In just a blink of an eye, he had learned everything. This set of leg techniques was extremely simple, but it was extremely exquisite and overbearing. There were a total of 5 moves, which were sweeping away 1,000 soldiers, stepping on mountains, divine dragon tail, heavenly blade revolution, and splitting the heavens and earth. This set of leg techniques would automatically increase in power as one's cultivation increased, but it also had an extremely high requirement for the cultivator's physical fitness. Not only did it have an extremely high requirement for the toughness of the legs, it also had an extremely high requirement for the control and flexibility of the body. Chapter 940. Tang Zheng immediately shifted his attention to mind manipulation. Mind manipulation focused on mental attacks, which was the same as the demonic sound of the bell, but had many differences. Mind manipulation didn't require the help of an external medium. With a very short incantation and the corresponding mental cultivation method, everything would flow naturally. With a single thought, everything about mind manipulation was deeply imprinted in his mind, and the speed of learning was no less than that of heaven's splitting kick. Tang Zheng had never practiced a mental attack technique, which was very rare in this world. Even the Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi didn't know how to use it. Therefore, compared to heaven's splitting kick, he was more interested in the inner demon's mind manipulation. Seeing that Xian Yin and the High Lord were very close to the treetops at the bottom of the cliff, Tang Zheng grabbed the shooting sun arrows that were colliding with the copper-yellow light and chased after them. At this time, Tian Chanzi also caught up and said indignantly, "This woman is really powerful. She even used a mental attack technique. I almost fell into her trap." Mental attacks hurt people invisibly. Even if it couldn't kill the opponent, it was enough to make the opponent fall into an illusion. It was more difficult to guard against than other physical attacks. "I'll deal with her," Tang Zheng volunteered. Heaven Monk looked at him in disbelief and said, "Can you do it, T.C.H.? How can a man say no?" Tang Zheng smiled evilly and directly chased after the two. Tian Chanzi looked at him deeply and muttered, "This kid always surprises me. Don't you know that this is a scare? I can't do anything, but you are so confident. Isn't this a blow to me?" Tian Chanzi wanted to cry, but had no tears. However, he didn't stand by and watch. Whether Tang Zheng was bragging or not, at least he would join the battle. Whoosh! The air was pierced with a sharp sound. Xian Yin's heart trembled. She looked up and saw 3 shooting sun arrows flying at her at high speed. Xian Yin felt bad. She had consumed a lot of energy. At first, she didn't take the shooting sun arrows seriously. However, the simple exchange just now gave him a new understanding of the power of the shooting sun arrows. The shooting sun arrows were definitely not as simple as she thought. This time, the 3 arrows were fired simultaneously, and the power was even greater. She threw the Great Lord down and said, "You go first. I'll catch up later." The High Lord's speed suddenly increased, and then he steadily landed on the treetops. Without any hesitation, he jumped into the dense forest and disappeared without a trace. Damn it! The High Lord actually escaped. Tang Zheng cried out in alarm, but he was too far away. He could only watch as the Great Lord disappeared into the woods. Since the High Lord was nowhere to be seen, all the more reason he couldn't let Xianyin go. A gust of wind blew over, and she felt a chill on her neck, causing her expression to change slightly. This set of leg techniques seemed simple, but in reality, it had anticipated many situations in actual combat. It seemed ordinary, but in reality, it was ever-changing. There was a saying that no matter how many changes there were, it was still the same. This set of leg techniques was a typical example of this. The simple leg technique included many combinations and changes. A series of attacks made people unable to defend against it. Tang Zheng also gradually understood this point and couldn't help but look at Qi Yu in a new light. As expected of the leg technique created by Qi Yu, there were many places where Qi Yu's shadow could be seen. This set of leg techniques was particular about being fierce and domineering. It was of the same origin as Qi Yu, and it was also suitable for Tang Zheng's style. Under the sweeping of 1,000 armies, Xianyin had no choice but to let go of Tang Zheng and subconsciously retreat. Tang Zheng escaped, but he did not retreat. His body leaned back, and with a forward somersault, he struck down with one leg toward Xianyin. Divine Dragon Tail Swing. At this moment, his leg was like the tail of a divine dragon, fiercely swinging down with a heart-palpitating power. At the same time, the dragon chi and dragon might in his body automatically mobilized. Pow! The air exploded like a firecracker. The power of this kick was even greater than Tang Zheng had expected. Yeah, Tang Zheng, the dragon god technique you cultivate, is actually very compatible with this divine dragon tail swing, so it automatically mobilized your dragon chi and dragon might. The inner demons was surprised. Qi Yu said proudly, "Now you know how powerful I am. The cultivation technique I created is definitely not a small matter." The inner demon snorted but did not refute. From his point of view, Qi did not seem to be bragging. Tang Zheng was secretly delighted. He silently circulated the dragon god technique. The power of this move was not yet exhausted, and it was even more powerful. Xian Yin narrowed her eyes slightly. If she was at her peak, she would not be afraid of these leg techniques. But now that she was seriously injured, it would not be so easy. Moreover, her opponent did not necessarily want to kill her. He only wanted to capture her. Moreover, as long as he could stall for time and wait for the Empyrean fairy to recover, she would have nowhere to run. In fact, Tang Zheng understood this, so he did not want to kill her. That was a fool's dream. Xian Yin gritted her teeth. She had never thought that she would encounter such a defeat. She was forced into such a sorry state by a first-grade Yuanying. Moreover, this set of leg techniques was very strange and powerful. It was not something that someone of his cultivation level should possess. She did not have time to think about it. She hurriedly circulated her energy, causing the bell to emit thousands of rays of light. The sound of the bell became even louder. The demonic sound entered his ears, and there was no sound anywhere else. It was completely poured into Tang Zheng's ears. Xian Yin had already realized that Tang Zheng's mind was firm. Ordinary spiritual attacks would not be effective. Therefore, she accumulated all the demonic sound in order to give him a fatal blow. If it was before, even if Tang Zheng did not have the inner demons, he would still be greatly affected. But now that Tang Zheng had learned the mind manipulation technique, he was able to comprehend spiritual attacks by analogy. As soon as the demonic sound entered his ears, he immediately activated the mind manipulation technique. Since the mind manipulation technique could take the hearts of others, it could naturally avoid such attacks. The inner demons were great at spiritual attacks. Compared to them, Xianyin was still 10 streets away. Even if the inner demons revealed a little bit of their techniques, it was absolutely not to be underestimated. Xianyin was originally waiting for Tang Zheng to lose his mind so that she could quickly escape into the woods and disappear. But she saw the corner of Tang Zheng's mouth curl up into a faint smile. Her heart trembled. She cried out in alarm. Bang! The divine dragon swings its tail directly shattered the light on the bell. With a cracking sound, another crack appeared on the bell. Xianyin was shocked. The bell was a sacred tool. Its power had been greatly reduced because of the previous crack. This time, a part of it was actually destroyed by the divine dragon swings its tail, forcibly creating a crack. Tang Zheng also did not expect this. The power of the divine dragon swings its tail was much greater than the original because of the effect of the divine dragon arts. Seeing Xianyin turn pale with fright, Tang Zheng moved his lips and chanted an incantation. At the same time, he activated the mind manipulation technique. An invisible force enveloped Xianyin. After all, she was an expert in spiritual attacks. She immediately reacted, her eyes releasing a terrifying light. You also know how to use spiritual attacks. Xianyin's voice became sharp. Previously, she only felt that Tang Zheng was a little extraordinary. But now, she knew that he was the most troublesome person she had ever met. There were very few people in the world who were good at using spiritual attacks. She was only able to cultivate spiritual attacks because of a chance encounter. It was precisely because of this that she was chosen to come to this world with a mission. Spiritual attacks were not only used to attack others, but more importantly, they could also affect others. This was a realm that many other physical attack experts could not reach. When she arrived in a new world and faced an unfamiliar environment, the spiritual attack technique was very useful. Moreover, she also shouldered an even more important mission. Influencing others would be twice the result with half the effort. New Era was influenced by her, and then attacked the center of Huaxia from the wilderness outside the pass. In the end, she expelled the cultivators and completed her mission. Furthermore, New Era established a new dynasty. If not for her appearance or bewitchment, none of this would have happened. This world would have entered a new world. Therefore, she was the one who affected this world. Facing the attack of the mind manipulation technique, Xianyin's mind almost lost control. Although her cultivation was high, in terms of spiritual attacks, she was far from being as high as her own cultivation. Chapter 941. Xianyin hurriedly activated the bell and enveloped herself in light in an attempt to defend herself against the mind control technique. However, she still failed. She felt as if her mind was in a trance, and she was about to lose control. She was very clear about the serious consequences of losing control. It was very likely that Tang Zheng would control her mind, and she would become a puppet. This was something that she had done to others before. She did not want it to happen to her even in her dreams. Tang Zheng did not expect the mind control technique to succeed and control her. Thus, he took advantage of the moment when she was distracted to raise his leg. Heaven-splitting earth. This was the most powerful technique in the heaven-splitting leg technique. In an instant, the aura of heaven and earth was stirred up by this attack. Tang Zheng's leg seemed to possess such great power. It broke through the air and rapidly descended. Pung! With a loud bang, Tang Zheng's leg struck the bronze-yellow light. With a crack, the light shattered. However, this attack did not use up all of its strength and still landed on Xianyin's shoulder. Pooh! She spat out a mouthful of blood. Her mind became more and more dispirited and unstable. Tang Zheng's was like a sword and was about to drill into Xianyin's mind. Xianyin's heart trembled. However, She knew that at this critical moment, even if her cultivation level was much higher than Tang Zheng's, if she could not resist, she would become a puppet and would never be able to rise again. She unwillingly widened her eyes and stared at Tang Zheng, not bothering to hide the raging anger in her eyes. Tang Zheng was delighted. He knew that he was about to succeed. This mind control technique was indeed powerful. Of course, if not for the heaven-splitting leg technique, he would not have succeeded so quickly. This set of leg techniques was not inferior to the Flying Immortal's sword technique in close combat. There was no need to rely on magical weapons. It was all based on one's own strength. It had indeed benefited Tang Zheng a lot. Suddenly, his pupils shrank. He looked at Xian Yin in disbelief. This was because a mist rose from Xian Yin's body and enveloped her whole body. Tang Zheng found that his consciousness could not penetrate the mist, and the mind control technique had lost its effect. He roared angrily. Was he going to fail at the last minute and let her escape this calamity? He was not willing to give up just like that. Another leg flew up, and a divine dragon swings its tail attack was launched. Bang! A huge repulsive force bounced back from a fog. His leg did not penetrate the fog, and the repulsive force made his leg bones ache. He immediately realized that something was wrong, but it was too late because the fog quickly condensed and turned into a crystal. She was sealed by the crystal again. Looking at this scene, Tang Zheng was shocked speechless. Except for Tian Chanzi and him, the others had not seen Xian Yin's previous situation, but seeing this change, they were also shocked. Tang Zheng's shock was even more intense, because he knew that Xian Yin had been hiding in the crystal at first, but he didn't expect that she could actually control it as she pleased. Not only did she allow him to escape from the crystal, she could also seal him inside again. Tang Zheng's mind control technique could not penetrate the crystal to attack her, and the energy contained in the crystal was so strong that even a physical attack could not hurt her. Tang Zheng was not willing to give up, and with a flying knife, he kicked the crystal. The crystal fell down quickly, but it was not damaged at all. Tang Zheng sighed and quickly caught up with the crystal. Holding it in his hand, the crystal gradually turned from transparent to blurry. Xian Yin's eyes were filled with unwillingness and anger as she stared at him, leaving a deep impression in his mind. At this moment, Tian Chanzi came out of the forest. Just now, he saw that Tang Zheng had completely taken the initiative, so he directly rushed into the forest to chase after the High Lord. However, the forest was too dense, and this was an unfamiliar environment, so he did not chase after the High Lord and returned empty-handed. He glanced at the crystal in Tang Zheng's hand and said in surprise, "What's going on? Where's Xian Yin?" Tang Zheng pointed at the crystal and said, "She's in there. She sealed herself in there, and we have no way to break it." Tian Chanzi still remembered the strength of the crystal and waved his fist in annoyance. This woman is really cunning. Previously, when he was being chased by Xian Yin in the cave, he was in a very sorry state, which made him suffer a lot. When he saw that Tang Zheng had the upper hand, he thought that he could capture the other party, but he did not expect that she actually had a trick up her sleeve. Now, no one could do anything to her, so they could only stare at the crystal helplessly. Tian Chanzi looked deeply at Tang Zheng and said, "How did you do all this?" Tang Zheng laughed. "A hermit has his own clever plan." Then, he jumped and flew back to the top of the cliff. The others had been watching them without blinking, so they had clearly seen the battle between Tang Zheng and Xian Yin. They had also seen Xian Yin's strange methods, so they all had complicated expressions. This was especially true for the Empyrean fairy, who frowned because she had never seen such a situation before. "Is there no way to get her out?" The Empyrean fairy asked curiously. Tang Zheng spread his hands. "I don't have a way, but you can try." "Okay, then I'll try." The Empyrean fairy clenched her fist and threw a punch at the crystal. Boom! A muffled sound rang out. Fortunately, Tang Zheng had firmly held onto the crystal, otherwise it would have been sent flying. The crystal was still intact. The Empyrean fairy's expression dimmed. She was very clear on the strength of her punch. Since it did not cause any damage to the crystal, it was enough to show how powerful it was. Wu Junshan asked with a complicated expression, Then is there really no way? He was a martial artist, so he could not think of a better plan, but he could not help but frown when he saw that everyone was in trouble. It's not that there is no way, but it will take a lot of time. It's not something that can be done in a short period of time. Tang Zheng muttered, "It's good that there's a way. What is it?" Lan Yu was delighted to hear this and asked. Tang Zheng looked at the couple and said, "This crystal is a body of energy. As long as we absorb all of its energy, Xian Yin will naturally be able to see the light of day again. Then, we will have a chance to deal with her." The Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi did not object because this was the best way. However, the most important point was that Xian Yin could take the initiative to melt the crystal and escape. If she brought it back to the island like the previous crystal, then it would be a disaster. Once she escaped, the people on the island would become living targets. No one would be her opponent. Tang Zheng had an idea and suggested, "Why don't I put her into Sumeru Heavens? That way, she won't be able to escape from me." Sumeru Heavens was Tang Zheng's territory. He had the final say. Anyone who entered it would not be able to escape. In addition, he could absorb the crystal's energy at any time and place. Over time, his cultivation would increase greatly. Even if she escaped in the future, he would not have to worry. The Empyrean Fairy guessed Tang Zheng's thoughts and nodded in agreement after thinking for a while. This method is feasible, but you must remember that she is very important. She is related to the conspiracy of the realm beyond heaven. Understood. This is the most important thing. Tang Zheng nodded in agreement. The purpose of the other world was definitely not simple. If they did not figure it out, it would be a hidden danger. As for what happened to the cultivators who were expelled, it was also very important to know what happened to them. It was a pity that they did not have anyone from the realm beyond heaven by their side. The demons who returned from the realm beyond heaven had all died in a series of battles. No one could answer this question. Sigh. I should have captured a few demons who returned from the realm beyond heaven. That way, I would have been able to find out what the realm beyond heaven is all about. Tang Zheng sighed regretfully. There is no medicine for regret in this world. Besides, time will give us the answer. The Empyrean Fairy did not mind. Tang Zheng smiled. At this moment, Qi Yu and the inner demons were locked in a fierce argument. Both of them wanted to take the credit for themselves. They both said that it was because of him that they were able to capture Xian Yin. They were in a deadlock. Tang Zheng, you be the judge, Qi said angrily. The inner demons also said, "That's right, young man. You be the judge. Was it because of my mind manipulation that Xian Yin had no choice but to give up and seal herself in the end? It was clearly my heaven splitter legs' continuous attacks that exhausted her. Even without your mind-absorbing technique, Tang Zheng could have easily captured her. Who need your help?" Qi Yu retorted. Tang Zheng helplessly shouted in his mind. "Stop. This time, both of you contributed. It was because of both of you that I was able to capture Xian Yin." "Young man, you can't say that. There's always a question of how much credit one has contributed. Who do you think contributed the most?" The inner demons did not give up and asked. Qi Yu also said, "That's right. Who contributed the most? Say it so that some people will understand their own abilities." Tang Zheng suddenly had an idea. There was no doubt that this time he had gained a big advantage. If it wasn't for Xian Yin, these two would not have been able to use Qi to teach him the heaven-splitting kick and mind manipulation. They must have many other skills or things that would be useful to Tang Zheng. If they were fair and there was no competition between the two, it would not be a good thing for him. This time he had tasted the sweetness of competition and felt that it was necessary to drive a wedge between the two. If they continued to fight, he might be able to take advantage of them next time. He gradually had a plan in his mind. After thinking for a while, he said, "The heaven-splitting kick was very useful. After all, with my cultivation, I was able to suppress Xian Yin. This is already incredible." Hearing this, Qi Yu laughed and said with satisfaction, "Inner demons, are you convinced now? My heaven-splitting kick is even more powerful." The inner demons snorted unhappily, but Tang Zheng did not finish his words and continued to add, "But at the last moment, the mind manipulation played the most important role. If it wasn't for the mind manipulation, with the influence of the other party's demonic bell sound, I would not have been able to gain any advantage. It would have been impossible to force her to seal herself. So in the end, the mind manipulation was more important and more effective. Chapter 942. Chi was stunned. He did not expect this to be the result. This was too much of bully. He was indignant. Tang Zheng, why is this the result? Tang Zheng had already anticipated his reaction and calmly said, I am just speaking the truth. Chi was furious, but he could not refute. After all, his heart was still in Tang Zheng's hands. He angrily snorted and said, Inner demons, don't be so proud. The inner demons laughed. I am proud. What can you do to me? Changing the topic, he said to Tang Zheng, Young man, what you said is the truth. Haha, I find that I actually like you a little. Don't. Tang Zheng refused. I am not glass. What is glass? The inner demons were confused. Chiyu disdainfully said, You don't even know this. What a country bumpkin. Do you understand the benefits of being gay? Disgusting. The inner demons was furious. Tang Zheng was too lazy to pay attention to the two's argument and directly put the crystal into Sumera world. With a thought, the crystal's energy was continuously absorbed into his body from Sumera world. This was just like absorbing air. He could absorb the energy of the crystals at any time and place, but he could not absorb too much at once. In other words, one could not become fat in one bite. He enjoyed this process very much. As for Sumera world, the crystal became transparent, and Xian Yin's eyes were wide open, but there was nothing she could do. Tang Zheng subconsciously looked down the cliff and asked, Can you really not find the High Lord's whereabouts? Tian Chanzi shook his head. This person is very cunning. When I chased after him, I already lost track of him. Tang Zheng was helpless. All right, although it is a bit regretful, but this time the Azure Dragon Hall suffered a heavy blow and also captured Xianyin, so this trip was not in vain. Marshall suddenly interjected. The Azure Dragon Hall's people are already mostly dead, and this is only a heavy blow. Tang Zheng guessed what she was thinking and nodded. The Azure Dragon Hall's strength is not limited to this. We were too optimistic. Although we've gotten rid of Elder Angler and some flying guillotines, their true power hasn't been uprooted yet. Furthermore, the High Lord hasn't been caught yet, so he still has a chance to make a comeback. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu secretly nodded. They agreed with Tang Zheng's point of view. They had been in the martial organization for most of their lives, so they could clearly deduce the general strength of the Azure Dragon Palace. The strength of the Azure Dragon Palace was definitely not limited to this. Otherwise, how could it lead the martial organization, the Li Palace, and the Sword Pavilion? Moreover, they had only killed a few flying guillotines this time. The remnants of the Li Palace, the Sword Pavilion, and the martial sect had not appeared, so the strength of these people could not be underestimated. Just as they were about to get close to her, an invisible force vibrated from her body, and the sword lights shattered. At the same time, Tian Chanzi also acted. The long sword in his hand trembled, and sword lights scattered all over the sky, accurately intercepting those sword lights. In an instant, all of the attacks collapsed, as if they had never appeared. This scene shocked the sword slaves hiding in the dark, and their breathing involuntarily quickened. Tian Chanzi's gaze turned, and he immediately locked onto the position of the sword slaves and lightly slashed out with his sword. The sword chi was like a rainbow. The sword slaves were stunned. They had only seen this kind of powerful sword technique from their master, the sword god. Who were these people, and why were they so powerful? But there was no time to think, and they subconsciously raised their swords to block. Crack! The long sword broke. They could only watch as the sword chi entered their foreheads. A line of blood bloomed, and their vitality was cut off as they fell to the ground dead. Tang Zheng knit his brows as he looked at the sword slaves, and doubtfully said, The sword slaves shouldn't be placed in such an outer area. They seem to have expanded the defensive circle. He had learned from Li Xiaoyin's brain that the Sword Pavilion's defensive formation was very different from what he saw now. It seems like Song Yu did something and changed the Sword Pavilion's defensive formation. Marshall's anger towards Song Yu had never decreased. Back then in the Imperial City, everyone had almost died in the explosion that he had detonated. This enmity was deep in his bones, and he would never forget it. Thus, Marshall angrily said, "He definitely knows that we are not dead, so he is guarding against our revenge." Tang Zheng laughed in disdain. "So what if he is guarding against it? These defenses will not change the outcome." Tian Chanzi urged, "Then let's hurry up and destroy the Sword Pavilion. Then we can go to the Li Palace." The few of them continued forward, and not long after, they met the second group of sword slaves. However, this time, the number of sword slaves and their resistance were clearly stronger. It was precisely because of this that they believed that their actions had been exposed, so they immediately rushed towards the steep divine sword peak as fast as lightning. The few of them quickly cut through the chaos, and without any obstruction, they arrived at the foot of the divine sword peak. Everyone soared into the air, and with the tip of their feet on a cliff, they did not take the normal path and directly rushed towards the top of the divine sword peak. Tang Zheng held onto Li Xiaoyan's hand. She was extremely nervous, and her palms were covered in sweat. Whiz! A sword flew over from the top of the mountain and directly shot towards Tang Zheng. With a thought, there was no need for him to make a move. The War Soul sword appeared out of thin air and welcomed the sword. Clang! A spark flickered, and the sword broke into two, but the War Soul sword was still intact. Everyone had already flown halfway up the mountain and were about to reach the top of the divine sword peak. Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air rang out, and 36 sword beams flew over from the top of the mountain, surrounding everyone. "This is a sword formation. Everyone be careful." Tian Chanzi immediately saw through the profoundness of the formation and reminded everyone. Everyone braced themselves as the 36 swords were about to arrive. The 36 swords seemed to have eyes and automatically split into several parts, each attacking their opponent, but at the same time responding to each other. Tang Zheng was shocked. This sword formation was not simple, as expected of the Sword Pavilion. They had their own unique understanding of the way of the sword, and they also understood the essence of it. Without a doubt, the existing warriors in the Sword Pavilion were unable to control their swords from a distance, but they could use the sword formation to achieve a similar effect. But looking at the 36 swords that were moving freely, Tang Zheng remained calm and composed. Seeing a few swords flying over, he waved his War Soul sword, and with a clang, sparks flew, all of them slashing onto the swords. However, he felt a huge rebound force being transmitted from the War Soul sword to his palm. Furthermore, with one strike, the War Soul sword was not able to break the seemingly ordinary sword. The sword formation gave these seemingly ordinary swords different characteristics. "Humph, you want to stop us with just a mere method?" Tang Zheng growled. The War Soul sword shone brightly. The sacred artifact's power completely erupted, and a sword flew out. Shwa! A lightning-like sword light shot out from the War Soul sword, directly slashing towards one of the swords. The person controlling the sword seemed to have sensed the danger and hurriedly retreated. However, it was already too late. Tang Zheng's aura had firmly locked onto the sword. Crack! With a crisp sound, the sword light directly split the sword into two. The sword formation was damaged, and its power was greatly reduced. Some of the swords seemed to be drunk as they started to sway. The others were all experts, so how could they miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Thus, they took the opportunity to counterattack. With the sound of battle, the sword formation was broken. The 36 swords broke one after another, and all of the attacks disappeared into nothingness. Everyone smiled knowingly. The tip of their feet tapped on the cliff, and then they soared into the air, steadily landing on the top of the divine sword peak. The sword furnace immediately appeared in front of everyone. The sword furnace was not big. It was like a straw hut, extremely simple and crude. However, in the eyes of an expert, this sword furnace was not simple at all. Every blade of grass and every tree contained the way of the sword. No wonder the sword god was comprehending sword techniques in the sword furnace. This place was indeed unique. Just by looking at it, it firmly attracted everyone's attention. However, their attention was immediately attracted by another matter. Chapter 943. In front of the sword furnace, a figure stood proudly like a desolate ancient sword. His two sword-like eyebrows were raised high, filled with sword intent. Qisha. This person was the sword god's disciple. He had fought with Tang Zheng and the others in the Changbai Mountains. Tang Zheng's expression was slightly cold as he stared at him. Compared to before, Qisha's aura was completely different. His cultivation had clearly improved by a lot. He still remembered Qisha's rising sun sword technique, so he did not underestimate him. However, with so many experts around him, he did not fear him. Tang Zheng, it really is you. Qisha's tone was filled with boundless killing intent. You killed my master. This time, I will make you pay with your blood. Qisha, are you the only one? Where is Songyu? Isn't he the one in charge of the sword pavilion? Tang Zheng asked curiously. 7 Kills said coldly, cut the crap. You'll have to get past me first. All right, then I will test your skills. Tang Zheng took a large step forward, but was beaten to it by Marshall. Let me. Marshall said, Sword God's disciple. If you miss this opportunity, you won't have it again. The meaning of these words was very thought-provoking. The Sword God's bloodline would no longer exist from today onwards. Therefore, she rushed to fight with Qisha. To her, Qisha was a very good opponent to train her martial arts. Ever since she started cultivating the fire underworld divine palm, her cultivation had greatly increased. Now, she had reached the limit of a Xiantian martial artist, 9th grade Xiantian. She was only a step away from the great scholar realm. This kind of cultivation speed was simply unimaginable to her in the past. She had once fantasized that if she reached the great scholar realm in her 30s, she would already be considered very powerful. But now, she was only in her 20s and was actually about to reach the great scholar realm. She was even more powerful than her master and master's wife. She was very clear on who the greatest credit should belong to. Qisha understood the deep meaning of Wu's words. His anger burned more and more. He said, Wu, you are in cahoots with these cultivators. I will take your life first and offer it to my master's spirit in heaven. Shua. He shook the long sword in his hand and performed the rising sun sword technique. The light at the tip of the long sword was as bright as the sun. It slowly rose from the sword, as if a red sun had risen from the sea. Marshall crossed his palms, one cold and one hot, the two attributes alternating in the center of his palms. Now, she had a deeper understanding of the Netherfire Divine Palm, and she understood more about the extraordinariness of this cultivation technique. When she first started cultivating the Inferno Divine Palm, it was very domineering, very similar to the roaring flame saber that she used to cultivate. But later on, she gradually realized that when things reached an extreme, they would move in the opposite direction. When the inner strength that was like a red flame was cultivated to the extreme, it actually gave birth to an extremely cold inner strength. Fire gives birth to cold, and when things reach an extreme, they will reverse themselves. This made her feel the profoundness of this palm technique. It was precisely because of this transformation that her power had advanced by leaps and bounds, and her body had reached a miraculous state of harmony between yin and yang. At this moment, when she used this set of palm techniques, her palms alternated between hot and cold. In the end, her left hand was cold, and her right hand was hot. If it was anyone else, they would have been tormented long ago, but she would not. 2 waves of inner strength silently circulated within her body. 7 Kills could also see that this set of palm techniques was extraordinary. He still roared and thrusted his sword forward. The sun-like sword light suddenly exploded, transforming into small sword chi. Like a shotgun, countless sword chi shot towards Marshall like marbles. Marshall did not say a word. Both of his palms fiercely pushed forward. A vast and mighty palm wind that alternated between cold and hot swept forward, like a huge wave that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. Bang, bang, bang. A series of explosions rang out as the palm wind and the sword chi collided. The two of them tapped their toes and rushed towards each other at the same time. In an instant, in front of the sword furnace, the two of them were like graceful butterflies, rising and falling as they fought. Although Marshall did not have a weapon, his hands did not lose to a weapon, especially the Netherfire Divine Palm. Cold and hot alternated, blazing and cold palm wind swept towards the opponent. The killing power was astonishing. Bang! A tree was struck by the palm and broke into two. Ice gradually formed on the broken part, and even in the summer, it still emitted cold air. 7 Kills just happened to see this scene. His pupils constricted, his heart trembled, and he immediately slashed down with his sword. Puff! The sword chi was blazing. His sunrise sword art was also a very masculine sword art. So even the surging sword chi showed a masculine chi, which made people feel as if they were burning flames. The air shook and was slashed to the sides by the sword chi. Then, a rainbow pierced through the sun, and the sharp sword pierced straight through, directly reaching the top of Marshall's head. Marshall growled. Both of his hands rose into the air, clamping down on the sword. The surging sword chi immediately tried to harm her hands, but his palms released 2 waves of inner strength, one cold and one hot, resisting the sword chi. Moreover, the sword underwent a drastic change. After a long while, he said, "I don't care. In any case, Master died in your hands." Tang Zheng shook his head. He did not want to argue with him and said, "I only want to ask you one question. Where are the other people from Sword Pavilion? Where is Song Yu?" There were a total of several hundred sword slaves in Sword Pavilion, but they had met too few sword slaves along the way. Furthermore, they did not see any other sword slaves on the Divine Sword Peak, so he was very curious. 7 Kills said sinisterly, "Song Yu is the same as you, ambitious and cowardly. When he heard that you were attacking, he actually abandoned Sword Pavilion and escaped with his people. If Master knew in the underworld, he would definitely be ashamed and regret passing down Sword Pavilion to him." 7 Kills was angry and unwilling, but also heartbroken. Furthermore, there were 2 handprints on his chest, one red and one white, one fire and one cold, making him look even more desolate. Escaped. Tang Zheng raised his eyebrows. This Song Yu was truly cunning. His ability to run away could be considered first class. Back in the capital, he had also escaped when the situation was bad. Now that he had heard the fighting outside, he did not hesitate to escape with a group of sword slaves. Those cowards deserve to die. They listened to Song Yu's bewitchment and have already betrayed Sword Pavilion. They are not worthy of being Sword Pavilion's people. 7 Kills angrily accused. Tang Zheng secretly nodded. After all, Song Yu was a member of a large family. He was eloquent and had many methods to bewitch people. Of course, he was not someone who only knew martial arts like 7 Kills could compare to. In the Sword Pavilion, although Chisha's seniority was higher than Song Yu's, he couldn't compare to Song Yu in terms of small tricks. This result was not out of Tang Zheng's expectations. However, the cooked duck had flown away, which made Tang Zheng very unhappy. He asked, "Where did they escape to?" "Don't say that I don't know. Even if I knew, I would definitely not tell you." 7 Kills said sinisterly. Tang Zheng inwardly shook his head. He knew that he would not be able to dig out any useful information from him. 7 Kills, you were clearly not Marshall's match just now, but you forced her back and even injured her. You haven't used up all your tricks yet, right? This time, I will personally witness your skills because you will not have this chance in the future. Tang Zheng had the confidence to say these words. 7 Kills did not refute him, but his eyes kept changing. In the end, he firmly locked onto Tang Zheng. He became resolute and said, "I will die with you." Boom! With a loud sound, he overturned the furnace beside him. Fiery red, molten iron spurted out from the furnace and splashed in all directions. The sword furnace immediately caught on fire. At the same time, 7 Kills grabbed an unfinished long sword from the furnace. Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He looked around. This sword furnace contained sword intent. This was the place where the sword god used to comprehend sword techniques, so it was not surprising that it contained sword intent. It seems like you've seen through some clues, but without my guidance, you definitely wouldn't have known. The name Divine Sword Peak is not a random name. The sword intent in the sword furnace is naturally emitted. Back then, Master saw through this point, which is why he chose to comprehend the sword again, build the sword furnace, and forge the treasured sword, because he purposely stopped and looked at Tang Zheng with a meaningful gaze. Because what? Tang Zheng asked curiously, and his interest was indeed piqued by 7 kills. Because there is indeed a divine sword hidden in the divine sword peak, but the divine sword is formless, only the sword intent, and the essence of the sword intent is all gathered in this sword furnace. Other than Master, only senior brother Jianshi-san and I know this secret. Song Yu, that cowardly fellow, does not know. This sword intent is the foundation of why the sword pavilion is called the sword pavilion. 7 kills, said with pride. Tang Zheng subconsciously looked towards the ground, where he stepped on a small piece of empty land that was not covered by molten iron. He could clearly feel this sword intent. However, the sword intent was too scattered, as if it had become one with the mountain peak. What use could it have? Master once wanted to forge a peerless divine sword, and had already thought of a way to absorb this sword intent from the divine sword peak. Unfortunately, he did not manage to wait for this day. What Master has not done, I will do for you. As soon as he finished speaking, the broken sword in his hand fiercely stabbed into the ground. Puff! The broken sword pierced into the rocks on the ground, all the way to the hilt. In that instant, the aura within the sword furnace changed drastically. All of the scattered sword intent quickly condensed and fused into the broken sword. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted as he shouted, "Oh no!" and hurriedly slashed out with his sword, aiming for Qi Sha's head with a heavy force. If he was hit, 7 kills would probably be cut into 2 halves. 7 kills revealed a sinister smile and said, "It's already too late." Bang! The war soul sword slashed through the air, but was blocked by an invisible force. Tang Zheng was shocked. He understood that this was the work of the sword intent. Haha, I understand now. The momentum is unstoppable. Tang Zheng, prepare to die. 7 kills laughed wildly. Holding the sword hilt with both hands, he roared, "Rise!" Ka ka ka. The broken sword rubbed against the rocks, making a strange sound. In the end, the broken sword was completely pulled out. The fiery red sword looked as if it was forged from blood. The divine sword has been formed. Quickly die. The broken sword roared and raised both of its hands. Its entire body seemed to be on fire. Its eyes turned fiery red, and its clothes emitted bursts of green smoke. As one with the sword, he bathed in the sword light. It was incomparably resplendent and slowly rose into the sky, as if it was really a rising sun. Tang Zheng was an expert in the way of the sword, so when he saw this scene, he immediately understood the power behind it. He hurriedly activated his cultivation, causing his innate qi to surge. The War Soul Sword was good at absorbing yin qi, so it emitted a cold yin qi that enveloped Tang Zheng. Kill! 7 kills roared and turned into a ray of sword light. As one with the sword, he slashed towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng's eyes were bright and full of expression. Holding the sword with both hands, he watched as the fiery red sword light got closer and closer. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind, and he subconsciously brandished the War Soul Sword. The War Soul Sword drew a beautiful arc. It seemed slow and gentle, but it accurately caught the broken sword. Clang! A wave of sword qi surged out, but neither of them retreated. Instead, they clenched their teeth. Tang Zheng was surprised to recall that his previous strike was not the heaven-flying immortal sword technique, but the second move of the Taiji two-form sword technique. Back then, he had learned a total of 2 moves, but he immediately forgot about them. He did not expect that the second move would appear on its own, causing him to subconsciously use it. The 2 swords were in a deadlock, But Tang Zheng's mind flashed with a flash of inspiration. He actually learned the third move in a split second. Previously, he had always wanted to learn the third move, but he had never succeeded. He did not expect that he would actually succeed this time. He really could not understand this sword technique. But now was not the time to think about this. He had just learned it, and before he forgot it, he immediately used it. The war soul sword swung to the left, as if there was a huge force pulling the broken sword to the left and then to the right, drawing a large circle. A surge of energy immediately emerged from the circle. From the inside to the outside, from the bottom to the top, like a fountain, it soared into the sky. Boom! With a loud sound, the energy collided with the broken sword. The two swords were knocked away, and the two people flew backwards. Gotcha! The gap on the broken sword grew bigger and bigger, like a spider web rapidly spreading out. In an instant, it covered the entire sword body, and then collapsed, turning into pieces that scattered on the ground. The light on 7 Kills disappeared as well. His entire body seemed to have been sucked dry of blood. He was extremely thin, his body was like firewood, and his eye sockets were deep. He was like a completely different person from before. Tang Zheng was also shocked by this scene. The power of the broken sword was actually so great, and the backlash to its owner was so terrifying. Impossible! How could this be? 7 Kills looked at the pieces on the ground in a daze, as well as the monstrous sword chi released from the broken sword. He danced around, as if he wanted to gather the sword chi. However, how could the formless sword chi gather towards him? It was all futile, but he was like a madman running around the room. Not long after, his body was set on fire, but he did not know. Tang Zheng secretly shook his head. This person had gone crazy. However, when he recalled the third move, he could not help but be deeply shocked by its power. But he was also dismayed to find that the third move had mysteriously disappeared from his mind, and he had no impression of how to use it at all. Sigh. He faintly sighed. This Taiji two-form sword technique was too strange. For a moment, he could not figure it out. Wong Wong. Suddenly, the war spirit's sword trembled without any warning, and the sword spirit's voice sounded in his mind. Master, quickly absorb these sword chi. Otherwise, they will be wasted after they spread out. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. He had actually neglected these precious sword chi. They were already ownerless. So how could he waste them? He immediately activated his power, causing the war spirit sword to shine brightly, and with a so sound, it flew into the air. Waves of sword chi seemed to have found their loved ones, and quickly gathered in the air. Whoosh whoosh. The war spirit's sword continued to absorb, and the light became more and more intense, dazzling the eyes. Tang Zheng was secretly delighted. The war spirit's sword had a sword spirit, and was indeed extraordinary. Otherwise, without the sword spirit's reminder, he would have forgotten about this. With the sword spirit absorbing the sword intent on its own, he turned his attention to 7 Kills and discovered that he had already fallen to the ground. His body was burning with flames, emitting crackling sounds, and was on the verge of death. Tang Zheng shook his head and said, "You also hate Song Yu for betraying Sword Pavilion. I will get him to see you as soon as possible, so that you two can reunite." I can't accept this. I will kill you." 7 Kills' throat still emitted intermittent sounds. His killing intent still did not weaken. Tang Zheng shook his head and said, "If the sword god was here to absorb the sword intent of the divine sword peak, then what he forged would be a peerless divine sword. And what you forged at the last minute is only a poor quality one, which is why you're defeated by my war spirit sword." Tang Zheng nodded happily and praised loudly. "Good, good, good. Tang Zheng, what do you think of my gift to you?" Chi Yu's voice rang out. Back then, the sky pit in the northeast, it was with his help that the war soul sword was able to fuse with the sword soul. Otherwise, with Tang Zheng's strength, how could he have succeeded in something that even the sword god could not do? Tang Zheng understood this very well, so he was not stingy with his praise for Chi Yu. "This gift is very good. I like it very much. Thank you. Haha, inner demons, did you hear that? How can your mind assimilating technique be compared to the sword spirit? The sword spirit will be of great use to Tang Zheng in the future. Qiyu proudly showed off. The inner demons coldly snorted and retorted, "My mind assimilating technique is stronger than your sword spirit. Hee hee, you stubborn duck. Tang Zheng. Let me tell you, as the quality of the war soul sword increases, the sword spirit will also evolve. In the end, it can even evolve into a physical body. You should be very clear about what this means." Qiyu said as if he was asking for credit. Tang Zheng was in full bloom. Of course, he understood what this meant. If the sword spirit really evolved into a physical body, then it would be like a sword expert. This kind of expert was condensed from sword intent, and he could not imagine how high his achievements would be in the future. A person's every word and action, even a frown, was a sword intent. If he wanted to kill someone, he didn't even need to attack. The air could be condensed into a sharp sword by him and take his head. He stared at the sword spirit without blinking. It was hard to imagine what kind of scene it would be when that day came. However, there was no doubt that the sword spirit was under his control. "Qiyu, thank you." He sincerely thanked him. "Haha, you're welcome. This way, you'll know that I'm really good to you. I'm not like some people who only talk about it, but don't practice it. It's just a little bit of profit, yet they dare to brag all day long." Qiyu did not let go of this opportunity to attack the inner demons. The inner demons was silent. He sulked and did not say a word. Tang Zheng secretly rejoiced. "Inner demons, you've better find a big benefit for me and then counterattack Qiyu. This way, you can get back at me. However, my benefits are great. Master, I'm still weak for the time being. I can't stay outside for too long. I want to return to the war spirit sword." The sword spirit said. Tang Zheng happily nodded his head. "Then hurry up and go in. Don't hurt yourself." With a flash of light, the sword spirit disappeared. It turned into thousands of sword intents and merged into the war spirit sword. The war spirit sword automatically flew back into Tang Zheng's hands. The sword spirit's voice sounded in his mind. "Master, the war spirit sword's power has increased greatly. The power of your heaven-flying immortal sword technique will also increase by a lot." Hearing this, Tang Zheng secretly nodded his head. He held the sword hilt, and with a thought, he used the heaven-flying immortal sword technique. In an instant, a dazzling sword light broke through the air. Boom! With a loud bang, the sword furnace exploded. It was already in a dilapidated state, and, after being burned by the fire, it was as if it had been hit by a cannonball. It exploded from the inside, and debris flew in all directions, filling the sky. Empyrean Fairy and the rest had been staring at the sword furnace the entire time, especially Wu. Just now, Tang Zheng had saved her and rushed into the sword furnace for her. When she heard the sounds of fighting coming from inside, her heart was in her throat. She really wanted to rush in and help Tang Zheng, but was stopped by Empyrean Fairy. Empyrean Fairy said that this was a rare opportunity for Tang Zheng to deal with it himself, and that there would definitely be no danger. Tian Chanzi also said the same thing. Although Wu was extremely worried, he could only stare at the sword furnace. Lan Yu held her husband's hand tightly with one hand and covered her chest with the other, feeling the intense heartbeat coming from her chest. She was the same as Wu, but after hearing the words of Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi, she endured it. Moreover, she believed in the words of the two, and she believed in Tang Zheng's strength even more. Seeing the sword furnace ignite with raging flames and the terrifying sword intent that blotted out the sky and covered the earth being released, Lan Yu and Wu almost couldn't help but rush over. The strength of this sword intent caused Tian Chanzi's eyebrows to twitch a few times. He smacked his lips a few times and sighed. The world is big. There are all sorts of strange things. So that's how it is. I was wondering why this mountain was so strange, so it actually contained such a powerful sword intent. But he still did not move, and Empyrean Fairy was even calmer, so the others did not dare to act rashly. In the end, with a loud explosion, the sword furnace turned into ruins and flew in all directions. Empyrean Fairy stood at the very front. With a wave of her small hand, a gust of wind blew out. The ruins were completely blocked outside, unable to harm them in the slightest. Tang Zheng felt his eyes light up, and everything suddenly became clear. The mountain breeze blew past his face, and seeing everyone looking at him with a burning gaze, he could not help but smile and say, "I'm fine." Wu Fei threw himself into his embrace and said with lingering fear, "It's good that you're fine." Tang Zheng ignored everyone's strange gazes and felt her concern and love from the bottom of her heart. He lovingly caressed her hair and said, "I'm fine. Don't worry. How could 7 kills hurt me?" Wu Chue said angrily, "It's all because I'm useless." Chapter 946. The Empyrean Fairy lightly said, "Tang Zheng, the sword soul can leave the battle soul sword body. This is already a 1 in 10,000 chance. But if you want to obtain the physical body you speak of, this is a very long road. In any case, according to what I know, the number of people in this world who can do this can be counted on one hand." Tang Zheng's enthusiasm was not extinguished. He still happily said, "Even so, I have already taken the first step. In the future, it is only a matter of time." Seeing him so confident, the Empyrean Fairy did not say anything more. Moreover, this was indeed a good thing. Lan Yu was more excited than the others, his eyes shining as he looked at his son and praised, "I believe you can do it." Wu Junshan also looked at Tang Zheng with gratification. On the way here, he once again personally felt that Tang Zheng was not ordinary. This feeling was even more profound than the last time he was in the island nation. "Thank you." Tang Zheng politely nodded towards them. Although he felt a little unfamiliar, it was still much better than before, making Lan Yu and Wu Junshan very happy. Li Xiaotian realized that other than herself, the others were all concerned about Tang Zheng. Her bright eyes could not help but dim as she gradually lowered her head. No one knew what she was thinking. "Since Song Yu and the other sword slaves have already escaped, what do we do now?" Tian Chanzi asked. Sigh. Tang Zheng muttered to himself for a moment, then said, "Sword Pavilion no longer exists, even though Song Yu is not dead. But since he has escaped, we will definitely not be able to find him in a short period of time, so there is no need to waste time on him. Let's follow the established itinerary and head to Li Palace." Li Palace had already taken root in a new place. This was the information that Li Xiaotian read in her mind. Since Sword Pavilion no longer existed, Li Palace naturally could not let it go. They had to quickly cut the Gordian knot and take advantage of this momentum to exhaust the strength of the Azure Dragon Hall and the other large organizations. Li Xiaotian already knew that she was from the Li Palace, so when she heard that they were going to attack the Li Palace, her heart couldn't help but tighten. Her expression became panicked, but she quickly regained her composure. She secretly warned herself that since she had decided to sever all ties with the past, this trip to the Li Palace was necessary. In fact, she could only be considered to have truly severed all ties with her former self after this trip. Tang Jing noticed something wrong with Li Xiaotian and asked, "Are you okay?" Li Xiaotian shook her head and said, "I'm fine." She paused for a moment and said hesitantly, "Tang Zheng, I have a presumptuous request." "What is it? Just tell me. If I can do it, I will definitely not refuse." Hearing this, everyone looked at her curiously. With regards to Li Xiaotian, everyone's feelings toward her were rather complicated. However, in general, they had already forgiven her. They didn't know that she would make such a presumptuous request. Wu's heart tightened as she stared straight at Li Xiaotian, afraid that she would say something that would make her worried. "You said before that I originally knew martial arts, but I lost my memories, so I even forgot my martial arts. Then, can you think of a way to help me recover my martial arts?" Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Zheng expectantly, afraid that he would refuse or say that he was powerless. Tang Zheng was silent, because he didn't know if he could do it. This was a situation that he had never encountered before. Seeing Tang Zheng's reaction, Li Xiaotian's eyes dimmed. The corner of her mouth revealed a bitter smile, and said, "If there's no other way, then forget it." This is just a fool's dream. This is the punishment given to me by the heavens, and I am willing to accept it. Don't worry. Seeing her so pessimistic, Tang Zheng hurriedly comforted her. I didn't say that there's absolutely no way. It's just that this is the first time I've encountered such a thing, so I can't think of a good idea right now. But since your martial arts are still in your body, then there must be a way to reactivate it. Tang Zheng recalled the scene of the car accident when she saved the little girl. He could confirm that her martial arts were still there, but she needed a trigger condition. Li Xiaoyan's heart was once again ignited with the flames of hope, and said, "Really? That's great. In any case, we still have a long way to go to the Li Palace. On the way, I will think about it carefully and find a way." Tang Zheng said truthfully. Li Xiaoyan jumped up in excitement and couldn't help but throw herself into his embrace. In an instant, the divine sword peak became completely silent, leaving only the whistling of the wind. Tang Zheng's expression stiffened. He never thought that Li Xiaoyan's reaction would be so big. He almost didn't have time to react before he felt a warm and soft body being stuffed into his embrace. He could even clearly feel the soul-stirring elasticity of her chest. Wu originally held onto Tang Zheng's hand, and when he saw Li Xiaoyan throw herself into his embrace, his eyes widened. The thing he was most worried about had happened. She actually took the initiative to throw herself into his embrace. This was too shameless. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu looked at each other, as if they didn't expect such a thing to happen. The enemy throwing herself into one's embrace was something that only happened in movies. How could it happen in reality? And it even happened to their son. This was truly a headache. Tian Chanzi, on the other hand, had an indifferent expression. He looked at Tang Zheng with a smile that wasn't a smile. Empyrean Fairy was indifferent, as if all of this had nothing to do with her. Tang Zheng wasn't in the mood to enjoy this beauty's grace. Moreover, he also felt strange in his heart. After all, he and Li Xiaoyan had been opposing each other for so long, and he wasn't a beast. As long as a woman threw herself into his arms, he would like it. So he pushed her out of his embrace and said calmly, "When I find a way, I will naturally help you." Li Xiaoyan nodded his head continuously, the smile on his face becoming more and more brilliant. "Let's go." Tang Zheng turned around and left, holding on to Wu's hand. He had seen Wu's reaction just now, so of course he could not provoke her at this time. Otherwise, he would not be able to walk in the end, and he did not want his backyard to be on fire because of Li Xiaoyan. Sure enough, seeing him tightly holding onto her hand, Wu's expression became much better. She meaningfully glanced at Li Xiaoyan, then obediently accompanied Tang Zheng down the mountain peak. The two of them took the lead and walked to the front, leaving the others a distance behind. Li Xiaoyan fiercely twisted his arm and complained, "She threw herself into your arms just now. Are you very happy?" Tang Zheng couldn't help but laugh. The usually carefree Wu was actually jealous. Women's bones were indeed not much different. "You're still laughing. You must be secretly happy, right?" Wu said bitterly. Tang Zheng retracted his smile and hurriedly explained, "You are wronging me. I saw that you were beautiful, so I smiled at you. I didn't smile because of Li Xiaoyan's hug." Wu heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and his face immediately revealed it. Although her martial arts were strong, in terms of meticulousness and shrewdness, she could not compare to Yi Dingdang. If Yi Dingdang were to encounter such a situation, even if he was very happy in his heart, he would definitely keep a straight face on the surface. Seeing her reaction, Tang Zheng felt relieved. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was around, he turned his head and kissed her. The two of them were about the same height, so he did not need to bend down. He only needed to turn his head to kiss her cheek. Immediately, 2 red clouds flew up on her face. She was extremely shy. On the battlefield, she was a decisive expert, but in front of love, she was still no different from an ordinary girl. She raised her fist, as if massaging it, and hit Tang Zheng's body. She said coquettishly, "You are too bad. Everyone else is watching." Tang Zheng chuckled. "They're still behind. How can they see? Moreover, even if they see, they will pretend not to see. They will definitely understand the principle of not looking." Flowery words Sophistry. Wu glared at him and said, "You don't want me to say it? Then I'll go tell the person behind me." Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and said with a mischievous smile, "You dare." Wu immediately widened his eyes and glared at him like a tiger eyeing its prey. Tang Zheng laughed out loud and quickly kissed her again. This time, he kissed her lips, causing her entire body to tremble. She could not help but lean against him tightly, her entire body going soft. Tang Zheng directly hugged her waist. She struggled a few times, but was unable to escape from his clutches, so she let him do whatever he wanted. Although she was shy in her heart, she enjoyed it very much. Occasionally, she would glance back and see that the others were still far away. She could not help but heave a sigh of relief. At least they did not see her embarrassed state. The road down the mountain was not long, and the two of them enjoyed a rare, intimate time. By the time they reached the foot of the mountain, Wu's face was already red and he was panting. If it wasn't for the fact that this place was not suitable, the two of them would have already fought for 300 rounds. Wu did not want the others to catch up and discover his embarrassing state, so he immediately pulled away from Tang Zheng and circulated his energy to calm his surging emotions. His cheeks and breathing slowly returned to normal. The others finally caught up, although they discovered that the two of them had normal expressions. As if nothing had happened, they knew that something must have happened between the two of them. They deliberately pretended not to know and did not point it out. However, Lan Yu looked at Wu with eyes full of praise and encouragement. He thought to himself that it was not a waste of his daily guidance. This girl had finally become enlightened. There were too many women in the family, and it was impossible to spread the rain and do evenly. This was a rare time to be alone, and if he was still hesitant, it would be snatched away by others, such as Li Xiaotian. She subconsciously looked at Li Xiaotian, but found that his expression was normal, as if nothing had happened. Her heart was moved. Li Xiaotian had always been known for his intelligence and cunning. Although she had lost her memories, this kind of nature still existed. In terms of scheming, he would probably surpass Wu. She immediately felt a sense of danger. She had to keep a good relationship between her son and Wu. She could not really let Li Xiaotian snatch her son away. Moreover, the Holy Maiden of the Palace had also cultivated charm techniques. In terms of dealing with men, she was even more formidable. Many women could not compare to her. Chapter 947. The chirping of birds and the fragrance of flowers, untainted by the mortal world. The scene in front of them was such a scenery, making one feel relaxed and happy. But the more beautiful something was, the more dangerous it was. Tang Zheng firmly believed in this point, so his mind became vigilant. Moreover, after his last visit to the Li Palace, he was even more afraid of the methods of the Li Palace. At this very moment, they stood in front of the new Li Palace. Just like the previous Li Palace, it was magnificent and enchanting. Perhaps this had to do with the fact that the Li Palace was filled with women who liked these flowers and plants. Li Xiaotian stared blankly at this scene. She had no impression of this. Although she felt that it was beautiful, she subconsciously felt a sense of danger. She subconsciously warned, "This place is very dangerous. Everyone must be careful." Hearing her say this, the others dared not underestimate them. After all, this was the Li Palace, where Huaxia's intelligence network was the most advanced. Moreover, the Li Palace's palace master, Granny Li, was the most sinister and cunning. Her territory was not a place that an ordinary person could set foot in. This was still a mountain valley. On both sides of the valley were layers upon layers of mountains, but they were like two slender and elegant women guarding the entrance to the valley. With Li Xiaotian's experience, Tang Zheng walked along a special winding path with great familiarity. The others cautiously followed behind him. Sense Sigma. There's an array set up in this mountain valley. If an ignorant person were to recklessly charge in, they would fall into the array. As Tang Zheng walked, he explained. He couldn't help but recall those bathing women he had met in the Li Palace. That was an illusion created by the fragrance of the flowers on the mountain that confused one's mind. This time, they were familiar with the path, and no similar situation occurred. When they passed through the long entrance to the valley and arrived at its center, the scene before them was even more beautiful and moving. It was like a paradise. Tang Jung thought that the Li Palace was truly formidable. It was actually able to find such a beautiful place in the middle of these rolling mountains. If this place was developed into a tourist attraction, the people of the country would probably flock to it like a flock of ducks. He shook his head, casting aside these random thoughts and focusing his attention on the front. There were no lofty palaces here, only small bridges and flowing water. In the distance, there were many wooden houses. It was like a village, with a few scattered women walking through them. Suddenly, an ear-piercing voice soared into the sky. Tang Jung cried out in alarm. Just as expected, although they had successfully passed through the valley, the moment they appeared in the middle of the valley, they were still discovered by the vigilant Li Palace disciples. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A series of whistling sounds came from afar, and a group of people rushed in front of them in the blink of an eye, blocking their way. Suddenly, a cry of surprise rang out from the crowd. Everyone looked at Li Xiaotian in surprise and subconsciously shouted, "Saintess, why are you back? You're not dead?" The disciples of the Li Palace had also been misled by the news sent back by Song Yu, mistakenly believing that Li Xiaotian had already died in the battle for the imperial city. They had never expected that he would once again stand in front of them, alive and well. Their faces immediately lit up with joy as they welcomed her warmly and cheered. "Saintess, everyone thought you had died. If the palace master knew you were still alive, he would definitely be very happy." Looking at these familiar faces, Li Xiaotian didn't know how to respond. He stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do. "Wait a moment." An ear-piercing voice rang out from the crowd. A woman stepped forward and pointed at Tang Zheng's group, asking, "Why are they here? These people are all enemies, and there are even men." The Li Palace had a rule that forbade men from setting foot in. If a man did, there was only one outcome: death. Moreover, although these people had never personally seen Tang Zheng's group, they were still intelligence collectors, so they had seen their pictures and recognized them at a glance. These were enemies, so why had they appeared in the Li Palace? And why had they appeared together with the Saintess? They immediately sensed something strange. "Saintess, just what is going on?" They subconsciously took a step back and warily asked. On the way here, Li Xiaotian had already learned a great deal about her relationship with the Li Palace, and she also understood that she was the Li Palace's Saintess. When she heard the crowd's questions, she was at a loss at first, her mind a mess, but for some reason, she was quick-witted and quickly calmed down. As if this place had triggered a nerve in her, the panic in her eyes disappeared in a flash, replaced by an unrestrained sharpness. Without being angry, she took a large step forward, eyeing the crowd like a tiger eyeing its prey. Seeing her overbearing gaze, the crowd subconsciously averted their gazes, not meeting her gaze. After all, her usual dignity was still there, deeply imprinted in their bones. Tang Zheng had originally believed that he had been exposed, so a fight was unavoidable. Now that he saw Li Xiaotian's reaction, he actually had the misconception that the decisive and ruthless Saintess of the Li Palace had returned. But he was not in a hurry to make a move, and instead quietly observed the situation. The others also curiously looked at Li Xiaotian. On the way here, because of Wu and Tang Zheng, Li Xiaotian had become much quieter. Although she would occasionally raise a few questions about herself and the Li Palace, there was nothing out of the ordinary. Li Xiaotian swept her sharp gaze across the crowd and said, "My matters. When did you have the right to question them?" This voice was not loud, but it was filled with an unquestionable dignity, causing everyone to be subconsciously startled. This tone was exactly the same as the previous Li Xiaotian's. The Li Palace disciples lowered their heads. Normally, Li Xiaotian had this kind of attitude in the Li Palace. She was the high and mighty Saintess, the chosen candidate for the next generation's palace master. Other than the palace master, everyone else had to listen to her orders, and no one had ever dared to question her actions. Tang Zheng and the others were even more surprised than the Li Palace disciples. This was because Li Xiaoyan's change was too great, as if she was a completely different person. It made people wonder if she had really lost her memories. However, this thought only flashed through their minds. This was because they were certain that Li Xiaotian had really lost her memories. All of this was an act, but the act was too perfect, no different from the real thing. This was the amazing part. Lan Yu's eyes flickered as he sighed in his heart. Although Li Xiaotian had lost her memories, many of her body's intrinsic qualities had not been lost, such as this quick-wittedness. If it was anyone else, perhaps they would have already panicked and revealed their true colors. But Li Xiaotian calmed down in an instant. She could simply take the crown of Best Actress. Li Xiaotian is really too smart and cunning. Although her nature is not bad, if she occasionally has a little thought, others would not be able to detect it. They are simply not her opponent. It may not be a good thing to keep this kind of person by my son's side. Lan Yu had this preconceived idea. The more he watched Li Xiaoyan's perfect performance, the more he felt it was unreliable. Li Xiaotian looked at the crowd with a fierce aura and asked, "Where's the palace master?" "The palace master has already left for some time." Li Xiaotian frowned. "Where did she go?" "Holy maiden, did the palace master leave before you left and still not return?" "Only you know where she went." Li Xiaotian was shocked. How could she remember where the palace master went? But she still did not reveal it. She nodded slightly and said, "Then I know. Holy maiden, these people are enemies. Why did you bring them to the Li Palace?" If the palace master knew, she would definitely fly into a rage. Someone cautiously glanced at Tang Zheng and the others, wanting to say something but hesitating. In the end, he could not hold back and asked. Li Xiaotian coldly smiled and mysteriously said, "This is the palace master's arrangement." If you can also comprehend the profound meaning within, then wouldn't you all become the palace master? Everyone hurriedly lowered their heads and said with fear and trepidation, "This subordinate does not dare to question the palace master's decision. Since it is the palace master's order, then we will carry it out." Tang Zheng sighed in his heart. Li Xiaotian had really given him a big surprise. Turning hostility into friendship, there was no need to use swords against each other. These ordinary disciples of the Li Palace did not pose too much of a threat to him. His main enemy was Granny Li. As long as she died, the others would be scattered soldiers and disbanded like a sheet of loose sand. Seeing that he had shocked these people, Li Xiaoyan's lips curled into a faint smile. He lightly nodded and ordered, "Quickly prepare a room. I want to entertain these guests." "Yes." Someone hurriedly left. Tang Zheng and the others looked at her in astonishment. They did not know why she had stayed behind. Since Granny Li was no longer in the Li Palace, then they should go find her. But in front of so many disciples of the Li Palace, they could not refute her decision. Otherwise, they would definitely be exposed. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. In the end, they decided to wait and see. They followed her to the center of the Li Palace. In a village with a small bridge and flowing water, there were many houses built in picturesque disorder. Along the way, there were many people secretly sizing up this group of people. The Li Palace was filled with women. Besides the women who were outside collecting information, many of the women had never left the Li Palace in their entire lives. They had never seen the outside world and had never even seen a stranger. They lived every day in this palm-sized place. So after dispelling their hostility, many people were very curious about this stranger who had come for the first time. Once everyone had been properly settled and the others had been dismissed, the cold and harsh expression on Li Xiaoyan's face disappeared. He smiled and said, "I'm sorry. I did not ask for everyone's opinion before making this decision." Everyone was silent. They stared at him without blinking. Li Xiaotian was somewhat alarmed. He hurriedly said, "If it's not appropriate, we will leave now." Tang Zheng broke the silence and asked, "Tell us your reason. Why should we stay?" Li Xiaotian breathed a sigh of relief and confidently said, "At that time, they said that the Li Palace Empress had already left and that no one knew where she went. Moreover, it seemed that only I knew. I thought that perhaps if we stayed, we could track her whereabouts. This would be more advantageous to us. Otherwise, finding a needle in a haystack would be too difficult. Hearing this, everyone's eyes brightened. At that critical juncture, he was able to think of so many things. His meticulousness was truly not something an ordinary person could compare to. Seeing that no one had any opinion, Li Xiaotian said, "I acted on my own accord. I hope that everyone will not take offense. In the future, I will definitely discuss this matter with all of you." At this moment, he was like a completely different person from before. It made people wonder if he was the same person. Chapter 948. Hearing Tang Zheng say that he knew where Granny Li went, everyone looked at him curiously and urged him to speak. Tang Zheng had previously learned from Li Xiaotian that Granny Li went to the northwest, but he did not know what she was going to do. However, looking at it now, she had been gone for such a long time that it was definitely not a small matter. What could be in the northwest? The desert. There was also the Tree of Life. Perhaps only the Tree of Life could attract so much of her energy. Previously, Tang Zheng did not pay attention to this news, but now he realized that he had overlooked such an important piece of information. She went to the northwest desert, probably for the Tree of Life. Tang Zheng said, "The Tree of Life?" Everyone was shocked. Besides Li Xiaotian, everyone had more or less heard about the Tree of Life, especially Wu, Tian Chanzi, and Empyrean Fairy. The Tree of Life is extremely important. We cannot afford to lose it. Tian Chanzi's expression was serious. The Tree of Life was related to the destiny of this world, and even the opportunity to advance to a large world, so it could not be lost. Li Xiaotian looked at everyone blankly and asked, "What is the Tree of Life?" It's hard to explain in a few words. Tang Zheng shook his head and did not explain further. "Oh." Li Xiaotian's brows flashed with a trace of disappointment, but he did not ask any more questions. This matter should not be delayed. Then we will immediately leave for the northwest desert. Tian Chanzi was impatient. Tang Zheng was about to nod when he heard Li Xiaotian say, "There's something I want to discuss with everyone." "What is it?" "There are so many people in the Li Palace, and not all of them are bad people. Even if they do bad things, many people have no choice but to do so. Can you not kill them?" Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Zheng with shining eyes and pleaded. No one expected that she would plead for mercy for the disciples of the Li Palace. They could not help but have a strange expression, as if this was too different from before. However, when he thought about how she had sacrificed herself to save a little girl whom she had never met before, it was not difficult to understand her actions. Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Zheng nervously and asked, "Can I?" Along the way, she had seen them slaughter the flying guillotine of the Azure Dragon Hall and the Sword Pavilion sword slaves. Her heart was moved for a moment. There were so many girls outside, and quite a few of them were still underage. They were all newcomers nurtured by the Li Palace. If she really did kill them, how could she bear to do it? Tang Zheng suddenly laughed and said, "Who said I was going to kill them? I am not a homicidal maniac." "Huh?" Li Xiaotian was stunned for a moment and was pleasantly surprised. "Really?" Tang Zheng nodded. Of course, what he said was true. Li Xiaotian immediately showed a brilliant smile, grateful. "You are really too kind. Although these people have made mistakes in the past, they do not deserve to die. I believe that they will be able to turn over a new leaf. Moreover, if you defeat the palace master, then these people will be like a group of dragons without a leader. We can still think of a way to take them in for our own use." Hearing her idea, everyone was astonished. So she actually had such a plan, one that no one else had considered. Seeing that Tang Zheng was somewhat unconvinced, Li Xiaotian said, "Perhaps you don't think highly of their fighting strength, but according to what you said, the Li Palace's fighting strength has never been the Li Palace's strong point. The Li Palace's key value lies in its intelligence network." Everyone's eyes brightened. Although Li Xiaotian did not have a sufficient understanding of the overall situation, her words had pointed out the crux of the matter. This was truly commendable. Although her words were reasonable, Tang Zheng did not completely agree. After all, these people had been nurtured by the Li Palace for so many years. If he wanted them to pledge allegiance to him, it would not be an easy matter. If he made a mistake, he would just be lifting a rock and smashing his own foot. Li Xiaotian was incomparably intelligent and immediately sensed Tang Zheng's thoughts. She volunteered, "I can guarantee that I can take these people in and have them serve you." Her every move was unexpected and made everyone have a whole new level of respect for her. Tang Zheng and the others looked at each other in dismay, as if they were pondering over the meaning of her actions. Seeing that she kept looking at him, Tang Zheng did not want to disappoint her and said, "If you really have the confidence, it's not impossible to give it a try." Li Xiaotian happily nodded her head. "Don't worry, I will definitely succeed." After pausing for a moment, she continued, "It's just that there's a problem right now, and that is that I have not recovered my martial arts. For the time being, I can still suppress them, but in the long run, I will definitely be exposed." "So you want to recover your martial arts as soon as possible?" "Can I?" Tang Zheng muttered to himself for a moment, then said, "On the way here, I have already thought of a method. However, whether or not it will succeed, I am still unable to make a conclusion. However, it is still worth a try." "That's great." Li Xiaotian was so excited that she almost jumped into Tang Zheng's embrace. However, seeing that Marshall had been eyeing him covetously, she finally resisted this impulse. "When do we start?" Seeing her impatient appearance, Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily and said, "We won't be staying here for too long. Let's do it tonight." "All right, after dark, I will secretly come here. I will not let anyone find out." Li Xiaotian's eyes lit up as she said. Hearing that the two of them were going to be together in the middle of the night, Marshall's nerves immediately tensed up. She fiercely glared at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng could only bitterly smile. His heart did not have any messy thoughts. Li Xiaotian excitedly left. Since she wanted to subdue these people for her own use, she naturally had to quickly familiarize herself with everything here. Therefore, she did not want to waste any time. As soon as she left, the others all began to talk at once. "Tang Zheng, you really want to help her recover her martial arts and hand Li Palace over to her?" Tian Chanzi was the first to ask. Tang Zheng nodded his head. "I feel that there is nothing wrong with this. Without Grandma Li Palace's threat to us will be greatly reduced. Even if Li Xiaotian does not succeed, it doesn't matter. Moreover, the disciples of Li Palace are all unstable factors. Since we cannot kill them all, it is best to restrict and manage them." The more Tang Zheng thought about it, the more he felt that Li Xiaotian's suggestion was not bad and was very feasible. But what if she takes this power into her own hands and turns it against you? Lan Yu asked. Tang Zheng thought for a while and resolutely shook his head. "I don't think so. You may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature. Moreover, did you notice that although she has lost her memories, many of the instincts hidden in her body still exist? For example, her ability to react on the spot is something that anyone can do?" Lan Yu asked. "That does not mean that she is a bad person," Tang Zheng retorted. Lan Yu tried to persuade him. "Yes, you can't. But perhaps it can also explain a problem. Who knows? One day, she will return to her former self. Especially if she recovers her martial arts and controls Li Palace. Her ambition will swell. People will change." Tian Chanzi nodded in agreement. "I agree." Seeing the two of them standing on the same front, Tang Zheng did not know whether to laugh or cry. But she really did save people. Just now, she even advised us to let the others live. "Isn't that kind-hearted?" Tian Chanzi said. "Tang Zheng, people's hearts are sinister. You must guard against them." Tang Zheng muttered to himself for a while. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, he finally shook his head and said, "Although what you said is reasonable, I feel that people should have the opportunity to correct their mistakes, as long as she has the intention. Of course, you can rest assured that if I find that she is showing signs of returning to her former self, I will personally extinguish those signs." Seeing that he had already made up his mind, the others did not try to persuade him any further. In the dead of night, many people had already gone to bed. Tang Zheng stood alone in front of the window. Suddenly, there was a gentle knock on the door. He hurriedly opened it. Li Xiaotian quickly entered, deeply afraid that others would discover him. No one noticed anything unusual, right? Tang Zheng asked. Li Xiaotian smiled and confidently said, Don't worry, I have made perfect preparations. Absolutely no one will notice. Moreover, no one will dare to follow me. Good, then let's begin. You sit cross-legged on the bed. Tang Zheng pointed to the bed and said. Li Xiaotian obediently sat on the bed. Tang Zheng sat face to face with her. He guided her to stretch out her hands and place them against each other. He could clearly feel the temperature of her palms. Her palms were a little wet, as if she was nervous. Tang Zheng comforted her. Don't be nervous. I will guarantee your safety. Completely relax and listen to my instructions. Li Xiaotian smiled and said, I will listen to you. This smile was very charming, causing ripples in people's hearts. Tang Zheng hurriedly restrained his mind and calmed his breathing. He urged his qi to slowly spread out from his palms. It entered her palms and flowed along her meridians into her body. The method he used was to use his qi to stimulate her inner strength. From there, it would resonate and allow her martial arts to automatically circulate. Her inner strength was stored in her body and was very calm. She had no way to mobilize it unless it was at a critical moment. For example, last time when she saved someone, her body was like a mountain of treasures. It was just that the treasures within were not excavated. Tang Zheng wanted to be the excavator. Step by step, he would guide and stimulate her inner strength to circulate. This would cause her martial arts to gradually reveal itself. This way, she would be able to regain what she had lost and master these martial arts. Li Xiaotian listened to Tang Zheng's advice. Her body relaxed as she felt a warm flow of qi from her palms. It flowed along her arms' meridians into her body. Suddenly, she felt a piercing pain from her abdomen. She cried out in fear as her face twisted in pain. Don't be afraid. I am here. Tang Zheng hurriedly comforted her. He had already felt something strange. When his qi flowed unimpeded into her dantian, he immediately felt a rebounding force attack his qi. This was the stimulation of her inner strength. It was an instinctive reaction. A martial artist's inner strength was also stored in their dantian. However, it would not be like a cultivator who cultivated a golden core. However, when the two forces fought in the body, the owner would suffer. She clenched her teeth and looked at Tang Zheng. She said, I am fine. You can continue. Bear with it. If your inner strength has a reaction, your chances of success will be higher. Regarding her endurance, Tang Zheng was not surprised at all. Chapter 949. Tang Zheng incessantly circulated his true qi, which stimulated Li Xiaotian's inner strength bit by bit. Her inner strength resisted, slowly flowing along her meridians in an attempt to force the true qi out. Advancing and retreating affected every part of her body, every nerve. She grimaced in pain, continuously sucking in cold air, and her entire body was covered in sweat. Boom! Suddenly, her dantian was like a dam bursting. Her inner strength rushed out like a flood, violently surging towards her true qi. Tang Zheng gave a knowing smile. It was not as difficult as he had imagined. Her true qi finally succeeded in stimulating her inner strength. This strand of true qi was too thin. It was not a match for the surging inner strength. So Tang Zheng controlled his true qi and quickly withdrew. Immediately, the inner strength began to circulate on its own, circulating a small cycle in her body, and then slowly settling in her 8 extraordinary meridians. The pain on her face completely disappeared, replaced by an incomparably comfortable feeling. In addition, she felt that her entire body was filled with strength, as if she could kill a cow with a single punch. For eyes met, her bright eyes were filled with Tang Zheng. She couldn't help but say, I feel like I'm filled with strength. Then get off the bed and try. Tang Zheng encouraged. Li Xiaotian somersaulted in the air, jumping from the bed to the ground. She punched out, creating a burst of sound. Her leg swept out, creating a strong wind that swept across the chair leg, breaking it. Only then did she restrain herself, pleasantly surprised as she looked at her own hands and feet, as if she didn't recognize herself. At the same time, the martial arts returned to her mind like a tide. Each move, each set of techniques was incomparably clear, as if they were deeply engraved in her mind. "How is it?" Tang Zheng asked with a smile. "My martial arts have safely recovered. I feel very powerful, as if I'm number one in the world." Tang Zheng couldn't help but laugh. Number one in the world is still far away, but it's enough to deal with the disciples of Li Palace. "That's good, Tang Zheng, thank you." Her eyes lit up as she looked at Tang Zheng. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She was full of charm. Tang Zheng's head moved. He seemed to feel that her every move was much more charming than before. In the dead of night, there seemed to be some complicated emotions brewing between the two of them. Suddenly, a fragrant wind blew in his face, and Tang Zheng felt that there was another person in his arms. She was sweating profusely, and her clothes were already drenched. Her thin clothes seemed as if she wasn't wearing them at all, and they clung tightly to Tang Zheng's body. Their elasticity was quite great, causing ripples in one's heart. Tang Zheng suddenly remembered that she was someone who had practiced the art of seduction. Before she had practiced martial arts, she had also restrained her art of seduction. Now that she had recovered her martial arts, her charm technique was naturally revealed, which was why he felt that her charm had increased by a lot. With such a soft jade in his arms, Tang Zheng couldn't help but feel restless. However, he still firmly pushed her out of his arms without leaving a trace. He said, "This is what I should do." Li Xiaotian didn't show the slightest difference. She faintly smiled and said, "Since I have already recovered my martial arts, I don't plan on going to the Northwest Desert with you. I want to take advantage of this time to reorganize the Li Palace and take them under your command." "So anxious?" Tang Zheng was surprised. Li Xiaotian nodded. "This kind of matter shouldn't be delayed. Will you be fine by yourself?" Li Xiaotian was full of confidence. "My conclusion is that I have a lot of prestige in the Li Palace. In addition, my martial arts have also completely recovered. The others are not my opponent. Even if there are some people who find the slightest clue and want to resist, as long as I rope in the majority of people, these people will be like small raindrops falling into the ocean, unable to make a big wave. All right, since it's like this, then we will leave tomorrow. You be careful. Go back and rest first." Seeing that he had ordered him to leave, Li Xiaotian did not stay any longer and left. Dong dong. Another series of knocks sounded. Tang Zheng was confused. Could it be that Li Xiaotian had returned? Was there something else? Creak. He opened the door and saw Wu Qiao standing at the door, staring at him resentfully. "Why are you here? Do you think I've disturbed the two of you?" Marshall's jealousy was not small. Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily. "What's the matter? I only helped her successfully recover her martial arts. Nothing happened. If something really happened, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you. Then what will you do?" Tang Zheng asked curiously. Marshall thought for a moment. "I will go find Li Xiaotian to settle the score. Since she dared to seduce you, I will not let her go." Seeing her jealous look, Tang Zheng couldn't help but laugh. "No one is seducing me. I only see you now. I won't seduce you. Is that so? But why does my soul fly away when I see you?" Tang Zheng said with a mischievous smile. He pulled her into his embrace and closed the door. Without giving her any chance to refuse, he directly sealed her mouth. She struggled for a moment, then completely fell into his fiery passion. During the day, the two of them had been rubbing their heads together, kissing and kissing each other. At this moment, in the dead of night, a single man and a single woman were in the same room. Everything that happened next was a matter of course. The next day, the sun rose high in the sky, and the sunlight shone in through the gap in the window, shining on the two naked people on the bed. Their arms and legs were intertwined, and they were bathed in the mottled sunlight, which added a bit of temptation. The two of them opened their eyes in a daze and looked at each other. The corners of their mouths revealed a knowing smile at the same time. Marshall lightly punched his chest and said coquettishly, "Last night, you were the one who refused to let me go. If I go out now, Others will definitely see me. How do you want me to face others? When Tang Zheng's hands started to become unruly, Marshall was too lazy to resist and allowed him to do whatever he wanted. Last night, she had almost turned into a pile of mud. In the end, she was at his mercy and unlocked several embarrassing postures. In any case, they all know about our relationship, and it's not like it's something shameful, so there's no need to hide from them. Moreover, your master and mistress should really want to see us together. Tang Zheng advised. Do you think everyone's face is as thick as yours? Marshall rolled his eyes and said with a flash of inspiration, Fine, it's good to let them see so that some people don't have any ideas about you. The two of them were well aware of who these people were referring to. Tang Zheng shook his head and smiled bitterly, saying, I really don't have the slightest relationship with Li Xiaotian, so don't be jealous. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind doing some morning exercise this early in the morning. Seeing the evil smile on his face, Marshall hurriedly begged for mercy. The two of them put on their clothes and went out together. The others had long since woken up and looked at the two of them, smiling meaningfully. Marshall wished she could find a hole to hide in. Even if she was facing a fierce enemy, she would not be so timid. She really wanted to hide behind Tang Zheng, but was held tightly by Tang Zheng, so she could not hide at all. She glared fiercely at Tang Zheng, but he turned a blind eye to it, making her so angry that she clenched her teeth. He directly led Marshall to the few of them and greeted them with a normal expression. Everyone woke up quite early. Tian Chanzi pointed to the sun in the sky and said, Is it still early? The sun is already shining on our buttocks. I think some people were too tired last night, so they couldn't get up. Tang Zheng said seriously, I've been running to so many places in the past few days. I've been fighting continuously. It's indeed very tiring. Seeing him speak nonsense in such a serious manner, Tian Chanzi was defeated and gave him a thumbs up, saying that he was strong. Empyrean Fairy did not participate in the two's banter and directly asked, What was the result of last night? Success. Tang Zheng's smile disappeared as he said, seriously. Lan Yu's face stiffened. She did not think that they would actually succeed. Not only was Li Xiaotian intelligent and resourceful, but she also had a high level of martial arts. She was like a tiger that had grown wings. If she really had any thoughts about Tang Zheng, then it would be even harder to guard against her. She frowned and looked at Tang Zheng with worry, as if he would be snatched away at any moment. Empyrean Fairy was not surprised because this was in line with her predictions. She said, Then there is no need for us to stay here. Wu Junshan also nodded. Yes, in order to avoid any problems, we should immediately leave. Tang Zheng nodded. I've already discussed it with her. We will leave today, and she will stay. What? She will stay? The others were shocked. What will she stay for? She wants to strike while the iron is hot and take over this place. She wants to take over these people and use them for herself. Tang Zheng revealed Li Xiaoyan's plan. Lan Yu muttered. Her ambition is not small, to be so impatient. Madame Wu is too kind. Time waits for no one, so of course I have to hurry. I hope that when you return in triumph, everything here will be under control. At that time, you will be able to add a new force to Tang Zheng's strength. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Li Xiaotian heard Lan Yu's words and walked over from afar. Are you really that confident? Lan Yu asked skeptically. Li Xiaotian smiled faintly. When you return in triumph, won't everything be clear? Sensing that there was a bit of gunpowder between the two, Tang Zheng hurriedly interjected. Since she is so confident, then we will do as she says. However, staying here is also very dangerous, so you should be careful. Li Xiaotian smiled charmingly, not forgetting to remind him with concern. You should be the one to be careful. We don't know what dangers there will be. Tang Zheng hurriedly looked away and did not meet her gaze. He calmly said, Then we will leave first. If the others ask, Do you have a way to deal with them? Don't worry, I will handle everything. This matter should not be delayed. Then we will leave immediately. Tang Zheng decided. He did not eat breakfast and directly prepared to leave. Sure enough, before they had even walked a short distance, someone jumped out and stopped them. Holy Maiden, why did these people come and then leave? Li Xiaoyan's face was as cold as frost. She coldly stared at the other person and said, "This is a secret of the Lee Palace. Do I have to report to you what the palace master ordered?" Her cold eyes stared straight at the other person. The other person was the one who had questioned Li Xiaotian yesterday. Chapter 950. This woman was called Ingyu and was also Granny Li's personal disciple. Li Xiaotian coldly looked at Ingyu and asked, "You stopped them. What do you want?" Ingyu's charm was only slightly inferior to Li Xiaotian's, but she was still publicly acknowledged as a great beauty. She raised her head to Li Xiaotian and said, "You've changed a lot since your return, as if you've become a different person. I have reason to suspect that you've already betrayed the Li Palace." Her insight was unique, hitting the nail on the head. When the others heard this, they began to whisper to each other. Li Xiaotian did not panic in the slightest, nor did he become angry. On the contrary, his lips curled into a sneer. Although she had never known Ingyu before, after yesterday's inquiries, she had gained a general understanding of the Li Palace without leaving a trace. She had the most thorough understanding of Ingyu because she had long ago predicted that she would make a move, but she had not expected it to be so soon. "Ingyu, don't you find this accusation laughable? I am the holy maiden of the Li Palace, so how could I betray the Li Palace?" Li Xiaotian retorted. Although Ingyu also felt that her suspicion was somewhat absurd, this was her intuition and she had to speak it out. The human heart is unfathomable. Even if you're the holy maiden, it's not impossible for you to betray. Ingyu refused to let go. Laughable. I see that you're the one who's betrayed the Li Palace, betrayed the palace master, and that's why you're trying to drive a wedge between us. Li Xiaotian struck later, but his words were aimed directly at Ingyu's weak point. The others all looked at her. After all, no one else had jumped out while she had blindly jumped out to accuse Ingyu. This was enough to make her credibility drop a few notches. Li Xiaotian very cleverly used this point to his advantage. So many of the spectators began to tilt the scales in their hearts. Ingyu thought to herself that this was bad. The holy maiden was resourceful and had a sharp tongue. Not only could she not gain any advantage with her words, she could also easily be dragged into a ditch. She hurriedly retorted, "I am loyal and devoted to the Li Palace and the palace master. I have no disloyalty. You're the one who is venomously slandering me." Li Xiaotian's eyes grew cold. "Since you have no disloyalty, why are you questioning the palace master's decision?" "I scram," Li Xiaotian berated. Ingyu's face flushed red. Suddenly, he raised his head and said, "I won't move. These people are enemies, and you lured them here, but you didn't do anything. I can't just turn a blind eye to this. They must stay and wait for the palace master to return. Then, everything will come to light. Then can you take responsibility for delaying the palace master's important matters?" Li Xiaotian pressed. Chapter 951. Hearing the Empyrean fairy's words, everyone's attention was attracted, especially Lan Yu, who could not wait to ask, "Is what you said true?" The Empyrean fairy nodded gently. Lan Yu's eyes gradually lit up. It was naturally a happy thing to be recognized as a warrior. Tang Zheng was also secretly surprised. In the past, he had always thought that warriors could not compare to cultivators because that was the reality. However, it seemed that he had also fallen into a misconception. Perhaps it was because of historical reasons that determined this wrong view, because cultivators had always been suppressing martial artists. If New Era had known this principle back then, he probably wouldn't have schemed to expel cultivators. Tang Zheng had too many warriors around him. Since warriors had unlimited potential, it was naturally good news for him. The transformation of the world's spiritual energy does not have too serious an impact on warriors, so there's no need to worry. The Empyrean fairy added. Everyone nodded happily. They continued to move forward. From afar, they saw the Tree of Life. The huge branches and green leaves covered the sky, as if a huge green umbrella stood between heaven and earth. Before everyone could exclaim in surprise, their eyes widened. That was because they had seen something out of the ordinary. 9. The originally clear sky above the Tree of Life underwent a huge change. A faintly discernible black vortex actually appeared. What's going on? Tian Chanzi turned pale with fright. Tang Zheng was also stunned. This was a situation that had never happened before. It exuded an unusual and strange aura. The Empyrean fairy's expression was solemn. She hesitated for a moment and said, "This seems to be connected to another world." Tang Zheng's head moved. The Tree of Life was absorbing the energy of the world of spirits and souls, so it was naturally connected to the world of spirits and souls. However, it was very secretive and was not as ostentatious as it was now. He stared at the black vortex in the sky without blinking. He suddenly had a flash of inspiration and said in surprise, "That looks like a ghost gate, but an enlarged version." An enlarged version of the ghost gate. Tian Chanzi and the Empyrean fairy were shocked. They stared at it closely. The more they looked, the more similar it seemed. Both of them had seen the ghost gate before, so it was easy for them to come to a conclusion. The other three asked in confusion, "What's the ghost gate?" Although they were considered to be the strongest among the humans, they knew very little about these mysterious things. Tang Zheng briefly introduced the Hellgate. The three of them turned pale with fright as they sucked in a breath of cold air and asked, "Then what's the problem?" The Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi both looked at Tang Zheng. The two of them more or less knew that Tang Zheng had absorbed the energy of the ghost realm through the Tree of Life. Tang Zheng took a deep breath and said, "If we cultivate here, it will definitely be twice the result with half the effort. Although this place is good, it's too big a target. It will definitely attract the attention of all parties." Tian Chanzi said worriedly. Tang Zheng smiled. "I'm just saying. Now that we have crystal stones, the spiritual qi is sufficient. There's no need to take such risks." Suddenly, he stopped and gestured with his hand. "There's a situation." Everyone looked over. Sure enough, there were many people surrounding the Tree of Life. However, no one could get close to the Tree of Life. This was because every time they rushed to the Tree of Life, an invisible light curtain would light up in the void, bouncing them all away. However, they persevered, but it was all in vain. These people were actually familiar faces. At least, Tang Zheng saw two familiar faces among them, Granny Li and Fair-Faced Flying Dragon. They were the ones who led a group of people to attack, but they were repeatedly thwarted and returned without success. The universal 8 Desolation Formation is still in effect. Tang Zheng was delighted. This group of people must have been attracted by the vortex in the sky. They've been here for so long, who knows what progress they've made. Tian Chanzi said. They might have also sensed the danger. Empyrean Fairy said. Wu Junshan suddenly interjected. I know Granny Li's personality very well. She doesn't get up early without benefits. If there weren't any benefits, she definitely wouldn't have come here. I'm afraid they've also realized the importance of the Tree of Life, so they want to take it for themselves. Tang Zheng thought for a moment and said, non-committally, in the past, the Tree of Life had always been under the Dragon Group's control. Others simply couldn't interfere or get share of it. Once the Dragon Group was eliminated, the government's control over the Tree of Life instantly weakened, which gave Granny Li the opportunity to take advantage of it. No matter what their goal is, we can't let them succeed. Since the Tree of Life is so important, it should be in our hands. Empyrean Fairy said, without hesitation. The others also nodded. Tang Zheng ignored the Tree of Life. The most important thing was that the Tree of Life was too mysterious. In a short time, he couldn't study it clearly. Moreover, he used the universal 8 Desolation Formation to protect it, so others couldn't get close. As they spoke, the group approached the Tree of Life. However, they swaggered around without any scruples, which immediately attracted the other party's attention. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A few sounds of breaking air came from afar. In the blink of an eye, a few people blocked their path and shouted, Stop! Who are you? This shout immediately attracted everyone's attention. Granny Lee and fair-faced flying dragon looked at each other, unable to hide their surprise and vigilance. They seemed to be isolated from the world here. They didn't know what was happening outside, let alone that they would be found. Therefore, they were very surprised by the arrival of this group of people. The two separated from the crowd and walked to the front, vigilantly looking at the group. Granny Lee was the first to speak. I really didn't expect to meet you here. Wu Junshan, Lan Yu, haven't you been hiding like cowards all this time? Why are you finally willing to show yourself? Wu Junshan coldly snorted. Granny Lee, that day in the martial sect, you joined hands with several elders to force me to abdicate. I haven't forgotten this matter at all. I must properly settle this debt with you. Regarding this matter, Wu Junshan couldn't let it go. Granny Lee said with a smile, Wu Junshan, you didn't listen to the High Lord's orders. Moreover, you betrayed the old sect master back then, leaving behind Tang Zheng, the root of the problem. Therefore, you only have yourself to blame for all of this. Lan Yu was furious. My son is not the root of the problem. You people who try to harm him are the root of the problem. I failed to protect my son back then. Now, even if I give up my life, I won't let anyone hurt him. Lan Yu's words were powerful and resonant, vividly displaying a mother's protective feelings for her son. Tang Zheng's head warmed as he looked at her deeply, his eyes filled with tenderness. Lan Yu didn't notice as she stared straight at Granny Lee. Granny Lee sneered mockingly, declining to comment. Granny Lee, fair-faced flying dragon, what are you doing here with so many people? Tang Zheng changed the topic. Why should I tell you? Granny Lee retorted. It doesn't matter if you don't answer. In any case, you didn't succeed in your goal, right? Tang Zheng smiled. Granny Lee and fair-faced flying dragon's expressions changed slightly, but quickly returned to normal. Could it be that they knew the purpose of this trip? This time, they had indeed lost control of the Tree of Life due to the destruction of the Dragon Group. In addition, an unknown phenomenon had appeared above the Tree of Life. That was why the High Lord had sent them here to investigate and do everything possible to take the Tree of Life for themselves. Seeing their reaction, Tang Zheng's head moved. It seemed that his prediction was not far from the truth. This group of people really did come for the Tree of Life. Immediately, the vigilance in Tang Zheng's heart became even stronger. Chapter 952. Although Granny Lee and fair-faced flying dragon didn't show the slightest sign of weakness on the surface, they were actually feeling a little weak in their hearts. This was because the other party's lineup was truly too luxurious. Moreover, the other party had already guessed their purpose, so they were even more uncertain about what the other party would do. Tang Zheng didn't put these people in his eyes and instead looked up at the sky. The black vortex made him unconsciously frown as he lightly said, I'll go take a look. Saying so, he walked towards the Tree of Life. Granny Lee shouted, Stop, and suddenly jumped in front of him, glaring like a tiger watching its prey as she said, Do you want to be the first to reach it? Tang Zheng chuckled and jokingly said, You've been here for so long. Have you made any progress? Can you break through this 6 directions, 8 desolation formation? 6 directions, 8 desolation formation? Granny Lee and fair-faced flying dragon glanced at each other. This was the first time they had heard of this formation, but they had already deeply experienced its power. Granny Lee was also quite knowledgeable about formations, but she was completely clueless about the 6 directions, 8 desolation formation. Seeing the two speechless, Tang Zheng laughed and said, How could the formation I laid down be so easy to break? Granny Lee's expression slightly changed. The appearance of this formation was very strange. She didn't know that it was the work of Tang Zheng. Hearing this, she looked at Tang Zheng with a complicated gaze. Why did you lay down this formation? Of course it's to guard against people like you who have bad intentions. Humph, this Tree of Life isn't yours. What qualifications do you have to say such things? Granny Lee questioned. Tang Zheng laughed and said, Although the Tree of Life isn't mine, it was only able to grow because of me. Of course, other people don't have the qualifications to take it for themselves. Originally, when he fell into the large hole under the Dragon Group's base, he accidentally encountered the tree of life and caused it to sprout and take root, resulting in this towering tree. Granny Lee didn't know the details, so she naturally didn't believe him and retorted, "Do you think we'll believe you just because of your mouth? I don't expect you to believe me." "Oh, there's something you don't know. I forgot to tell you." "What is it?" Tang Zheng looked at them playfully and said, "The Azure Dragon Hall has already been destroyed by us. Your High Lord fled in a sorry state, like a stray dog." "What did you say?" As soon as he said this, everyone on the other side turned pale with fright. One after another, they scolded, "Nonsense! Our Lord is unparalleled in this world. How can you fight against him? Umph! If you want to use this method to scare us, your method is too clumsy." Tang Zheng laughed out loud as he listened to their rebuttal. "What are you laughing at? Could it be that you've been exposed by us, so you're trying to cover it up? He must be hiding something because of his guilty conscience." Tang Zheng shook his head and said, "You guys are really deceiving yourselves. Do I need to scare you? Do you think you're a match for us?" He thought too highly of himself. "Let me tell you, not only did your exalts escape, Elder Angler of the Two Reverends is already dead. As for Xianyin, I have already captured her alive." "What?" Fair-faced Flying Dragon screamed. Previously, he was still able to maintain his calm and question Tang Zheng's words. But as soon as he heard Xianyin's name, his expression changed. It was like the sky during the dog days of June, dark and gloomy, mixed with panic. The others, including Granny Lee, had never heard of the name Xianyin, but Fair-faced Flying Dragon had occasionally heard the High Lord mention it. This was the biggest secret of the Azure Dragon Hall, and it was impossible for outsiders to know about it. But Tang Zheng said it so casually, so everything went without saying. His words were most likely true. But according to the High Lord, the Third Reverend, Xianyin, was an extremely powerful expert. Even the High Lord felt inferior. So how could she be captured alive? Fair-faced Flying Dragon was puzzled as he looked at Tang Zheng with burning eyes. From Fair-faced Flying Dragon's reaction, Tang Zheng had already guessed a bit. He smiled meaningfully. "It seems that you know more than Granny Lee." Granny Lee also noticed the clues and suspiciously looked at Fair-faced Flying Dragon. She was very clear that Fair-faced Flying Dragon knew more about the Azure Dragon Hall, so she quickly asked, "What is going on?" Fair-faced Flying Dragon's face turned from black to white. He moved his lips, but no words came out. But this reaction was enough to explain the problem. Granny Lee's face also became incomparably pale. Could it be that what he said is true? This is only about the Azure Dragon Hall. "Granny Lee, I also have some big news about the Lee Palace. Do you want to hear it?" Tang Zheng asked with a smile. "What did you do to the Lee Palace?" "The Lee Palace has already changed hands." "Umph. You think that the disciples of the Lee Palace will submit to you?" "Wishful thinking. Moreover, it is impossible for you to know the location of the Lee Palace," Granny Lee said with disdain. Tang Zheng shook his head. "I won't tell you the details. I just want to let you know." He didn't want to bring up Li Xiaotian, so he didn't say anything else. But these words were like a heavy bomb thrown into the crowd, setting off stormy waves in their hearts. Not only did Fair-faced Flying Dragon and Granny Lee's faces change, but the others were also at a loss for words. Tang Zheng faintly smiled. This move was enough to break the majority of their will, so the following matter would be much easier to handle. "If you surrender, except for the leader, I can let the rest of you live. After this village, there won't be another opportunity," Tang Zheng advised. "Don't believe him." Fair-faced Flying Dragon suddenly shouted, "We will live and die together. We can definitely defeat them." Granny Lee's eyes flickered, but she didn't forget to shout, "Right, everyone, let's fight to the death." Tang Zheng shook his head. "I gave you a chance to live, but you chose to seek your own deaths. You can't blame me for this." Wu Junshan and the rest were already ready to make a move. Hearing Tang Zheng's order, all of them rushed towards the enemy. Wu Junshan firmly locked onto Granny Lee. His figure flashed in front of her, and he launched a fierce attack on her. Seeing this, Granny Lee shouted, "Wu Junshan, I didn't kill you that day. Today, you will die without a doubt." Whoosh! She waved the crutch in her hand, and a strong wind swept toward Wu Junshan. Wu Junshan drew circles with his hands, and the continuous power of yin-yang harmony gushed out from the circles. The crutch was pushed aside, and the attack missed. However, Granny Lee's wrist shook, and the attack of the crutch suddenly changed. It drew a shadow and hit Wu Junshan's head. This change of move was so fast and strange that it was completely unexpected. After all, she was a first-grade martial king, one level higher than Wu Junshan's ninth-grade supreme power realm, so she was more skillful. Seeing this, Wu Junshan's hair stood on end. He was shocked. He lowered his body and raised his hands, drawing 9 circles at once. This was the highest level of yin-yang harmony. He had mastered it, and in an instant, the explosive power increased exponentially. Bang! He caught the crutch with his bare hands. The huge force made the bones in his arms creak. Yin-yang harmony was best at using softness to overcome the strong, so he was not overwhelmed by the power of the crutch. Wu Junshan's face flushed red. He gritted his teeth and returned to normal. He turned his palms and slapped toward Granny Lee's head. Granny Lee snorted disdainfully. She swept her crutch, and a shadow of the crutch appeared in front of Wu Junshan. It was extremely dangerous. "I'll also fight you, Granny Lee." Lan Yu's voice came, and a graceful figure appeared in front of Granny Lee in a flash. She pointed a finger, and a brilliant power burst out from her fingertip. Lan Yu had once pointed a finger at a mecha, but that mecha could not withstand the power of her finger. One could imagine how terrifying the power of her finger was. Granny Lee knew how powerful Lan Yu was, so she shouted, "Lan Yu, your yang-breaking finger is fierce and overbearing, but it will be very difficult for you to defeat me." Lan Yu was unmoved and said coldly, "I can't defeat you alone, but we are husband and wife, and we can cut through metal." As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed a finger at the shadow of the crutch. Chapter 953. Fair-faced flying dragon's face turned serious as he watched the two masters attacking him from the front and back. With a flick of his wrist, sword flowers bloomed in the air. Preemptive strike. He decided to use Tian Chanzi as a breakthrough point. Obviously, Tian Chanzi was slightly inferior to the Empyrean Fairy. Tian Chanzi saw the dazzling sword light piercing towards him, and the sword in his hand moved. His sword was a heaven-grade magic treasure and could not be compared to the Taiya sword, but he had the advantage of having more profound skills. Thus, in the midst of the sword light, there were sounds of clashing and sparks flying in all directions. Tian Chanzi's otherworldly flying fairy was complex and ever-changing. It could be graceful or heavy, but it could be mastered, and its power was peerless. Fair-faced flying dragon's sword moves were particular about the word strange. Strange moves came out one after another to resolve the most dangerous situation, which was unexpected. The two sword moves were exquisite and peerless. In the blink of an eye, they had exchanged more than 10 moves. Tian Chanzi became more and more courageous, while Fair-faced Flying Dragon was retreating as he fought. He felt a huge pressure. He gradually understood that although he did not underestimate his opponent, he still underestimated Tian Chanzi. He was also a sword master, but in the face of Tian Chanzi's sword moves, he could only defend. Occasionally, he would counterattack, but it was easily resolved by Tian Chanzi. He knew that things were not looking good. This time he was doomed. He retreated a few more steps, but heard a gust of wind behind him. He subconsciously turned back, but the Taiya sword had already stabbed back. The Taiya sword stabbed into the air, and a palm imprinted on his body. Bang! A huge force burst out, and he flew backwards, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Before he landed, he saw Tian Chanzi leaping into the air, the sword light in his hand blossoming and slashing towards him. Fair-faced Flying Dragon ignored the raging waves and immense pain in his body, and raised the Taiya sword with difficulty. Clang! The Taiya sword flew out of his hand. Puff! Blood spurted out from his chest as a huge sword wound appeared on his chest. Fortunately, at the critical moment, he forcibly twisted his body and moved back a few inches, so the sword didn't cut him in half. But there was no doubt that he was heavily injured. He fell heavily to the ground, splashing blood all over the ground, and his eyes instantly became dispirited. Tian Chanzi reacted quickly and caught up with Tai Jian in a flash. A look of joy appeared on his face. The Empyrean fairy glanced at him indifferently. She didn't fight for it. She didn't use a sword, so it was useless even if she had the Tai sword. Tian Chanzi gently stroked the Tai sword as if he was caressing his beloved woman. His eyes burned with a blazing light as he muttered to himself, "The Tai sword is indeed extraordinary." Shua! He waved the Tai sword, bringing out a biting cold sword chi. He was overjoyed and quickly cut a wound on his palm. His blood dyed the Tai sword red. At the same time, he muttered some words. Although the Tai sword fell into the hands of fair-faced flying dragon, he was a martial artist and didn't know the method to bind it with blood. So, strictly speaking, he couldn't be considered the Tai sword's owner. As for its previous owner, Qin Shi Huang, he was already dead. The contract between them had long since expired, making it an ownerless item. Tian Chanzi was very clear on this point, so he couldn't wait to bind it with blood. Saint weapons were hard to come by, so he couldn't miss this opportunity. When the incantation was finished, the Tai sword immediately released a red light. It quickly converged and disappeared along with the blood. Success! Tian Chanzi laughed loudly. Fair-faced flying dragon staggered to his feet, clutching his chest. He looked at this scene with a pale face and shouted, "What did you do to my Tai sword?" Tian Chanzi waved the Tai sword, bringing out an even stronger sword chi. He coldly looked at fair-faced flying dragon and said, "Who said the Tai sword was yours? You took the Tai sword from Qin Shi Huang's hands, but you only used a little of it. The essence of the Tai sword was not used at all. It was simply a waste. Now that it is with me, it can display its true power." The Tai sword also had a sword spirit. Hearing these words, it seemed to be encouraged. It buzzed and trembled, as if it was praising him. Fair-faced flying dragon saw this scene, and his face became even paler. Although he didn't want to admit it, it was the truth. He really didn't become the true owner of the Tai sword. Immediately, his face revealed a bleak and self-deprecating smile. At the same time, the other people's battle became more and more intense. Wu bravely advanced and began to fight with several Li Palace disciples. Her martial arts were much higher than theirs. Although she was alone, she didn't fall into a disadvantage. The Inferno Divine Palm's power was unparalleled. With a few palm strikes, she sent several people flying, causing others to shrink back. However, the addition of another group of people caused Marshall to feel great pressure. These people were all master-level warriors because they were flying guillotines. Tang Zheng had already noticed this group of flying guillotines. Their attire was too special, and he could recognize them at a glance. Seeing that they were attacking Marshall, how could Tang Zheng just sit back and watch? The War Spirit sword directly slashed at one of the flying guillotines. With a poochie sound, the flying guillotine was torn into pieces. The War Spirit sword lightly touched another person's throat. Pooh! A small red dot appeared. That person's eyes widened, and he fell to the ground dead. Tang Zheng had reached the first grade nascent soul stage, which was many levels higher than these great scholar stage martial artists. Moreover, these flying guillotines were like a sheet of loose sand, and without the command of a high lord, they were unable to display their true power. Seeing that Tang Zheng was attacking, most of the flying guillotines attacked Tang Zheng like a tide. If it was before, Tang Zheng would definitely turn around and run. However, he was now in an invincible position. The War Spirit's sword shone brightly like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, reaping their lives one by one. He did not show the slightest bit of mercy to these blood guillotines, because the blood guillotines were not like the disciples of the Li Palace who were ignorant of the ways of the world. Their hands were all stained with blood, and this could be seen from the powerful killing intent they exuded. In fact, the flying guillotine's refinement required countless killings in order to accumulate such a strong, murderous aura in its body. seeing their companions fall one by one under the war spirit's sword. The flying guillotines gradually revealed terrified expressions and retreated step by step. In addition, the battle between fair-faced flying dragon and Granny Lee had weakened their momentum by more than half. Although Granny Lee was a first-grade martial king, she was still forced into a corner by two people who were about to step into the threshold of martial king. The loss of her companions had seriously affected Granny Lee's normal performance. She no longer had the determination to continue fighting and had been looking for an opportunity to escape. However, Wu Junshan and Lan Yu had a tacit understanding. Although their cultivation was slightly inferior, their combined attacks were very powerful. They learned from each other's strengths and made up for each other's shortcomings. Suddenly, Wu Junshan deliberately revealed an opening. Granny Lee's eyes flashed. She was overjoyed and secretly said that the heavens were helping her. She attacked Wu Junshan like lightning. Wu Junshan sneered in his heart, but pretended not to know. At this moment, Lan Yu took advantage of the situation and attacked Granny Lee's vital points with lightning speed. Damn, it's a trap. Granny Lee's heart darkened, but she did not panic. She continued to attack Wu Junshan, trying to force Lan Yu to stop. This was because if Lan Yu did not stop, Wu Junshan would definitely be injured. However, she had underestimated the tacit understanding and determination of this couple. The two looked at each other and understood what the other was thinking. Lan Yu did not stop, so she saw the determination in her husband's eyes. She was not an ordinary woman, so of course she would not act like a little girl. This was a risky move in chess. Not only did Lan Yu not stop, she moved even faster and attacked even more fiercely. The sword flashed and pierced through fair-faced flying dragon's chest. Boom! Fair-faced flying dragon stared blankly at his chest. His eyes quickly lost their vitality, and he fell to the ground. Chapter 954. Fair-faced flying dragon's life was taken away by the Teia's sword. The sound of his body hitting the ground was like a clap of thunder that exploded in Granny Lee's heart. It was as if she could see her own death. She raised her walking stick and fought back with great difficulty. Lan Yu fought bravely. Boom! Suddenly, there was a clap of thunder in the sky. A black bolt of lightning fell from the black vortex and struck the Tree of Life. Hua! A ray of light rose from the Tree of Life and clashed with the black lightning, exploding into a myriad of dazzling lights. This change was out of everyone's expectations. Even Granny Lee was stunned. They had been here for so long and had only seen the vortex in the sky become darker and darker. There were no other changes, let alone the black lightning. Could lightning be black? She had never heard of or seen anything like this before. The others subconsciously stopped fighting and raised their heads to look at this inconceivable scene. Tang Zheng shivered and shouted, "Not good!" He took the lead and rushed towards the Tree of Life. He quickly activated the Universal 8 Desolation Array and rushed into the invisible protective barrier. Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi were also attracted by this scene and quickly followed. Lan Yu, Wu Junshan, and Marshall's expressions all changed. Seeing the three of them as if they were facing a great enemy, they knew that something must have gone wrong. Lan Yu was absent-minded, but Granny Lee quickly seized the opportunity. Her walking stick tapped on the ground, and with the help of the huge rebound, she flew into the distance like an arrow. When Lan Yu reacted, Granny Lee had already fled far away. She hatefully stomped her foot. "I'll chase after her. Marshall, take care of your master." Wu Junshan immediately supported Wu Junshan. The rest of the defeated soldiers did not have the heart to continue fighting. Although many of them had higher cultivations than Wu Junshan, no one dared to attack the two of them. Instead, they quickly fled into the distance, not even daring to look back. Marshall did not have the energy to deal with these people. She worriedly looked at the vortex in the sky. Wu Junshan coughed and weakly said, "Let's go in as well." Marshall supported Wu Junshan as they walked step by step into the 6 directions, 8 desolation array. Admiring the majesty of the Tree of Life at close range, one could not help but sigh at its miraculous nature. Wu Junshan took a deep breath and felt the air enter his lungs through his trachea. The pain from his wound actually lessened slightly. He said in surprise, "This air is too magical. Perhaps this is the effect of the spiritual energy that they were talking about." That was indeed the case. The spirit chi was dense enough. Even if an ordinary person inhaled it, it would be greatly beneficial to their body. The Tree of Life continuously released spirit chi. The spirit chi here had reached an extremely high level. That was why Wu Junshan had such a feeling. Tang Zheng had already rushed to the bottom of the Tree of Life. With a tap of his toes, he climbed up the trunk and rushed to the top of the tree as if he was walking on flat ground. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the dense foliage. Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi were a little slower, but they followed without any hesitation. Wu Junshan was injured and was unable to withstand such a jolt. He could only wait anxiously under the tree with Wu. Whiz! Tang Zheng brushed past the dense foliage and soared up. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as he reached the top. He soared up from the foliage and landed on the treetop. Looking up, the black vortex in the sky seemed to be within reach. Observing the vortex at close range, he immediately felt a soul-stirring yin qi being emitted from the vortex, enveloping the sky. If not for the 6 directions, 8 desolation array protecting the Tree of Life, this yin qi would have directly corroded the Tree of Life. It really is the ghost realm. Tang Zheng muttered to himself. Boom! Suddenly, another clap of thunder exploded in the vortex. Then, another bolt of lightning descended, ruthlessly striking the invisible light barrier. Immediately, ripples of light rippled out. The ripples of light quickly spread out in all directions. Not long after, it covered the entire light barrier. The originally invisible light barrier immediately appeared. Boom! Immediately after, another black bolt of lightning. No, 3 black bolts of lightning descended from the sky and landed on the light barrier. Immediately, the light barrier began to tremble violently. In the end, with a cautious sound, the light barrier actually shattered into pieces, turning into specks of light that scattered in all directions. The 6 directions, 8 desolation array was broken. Tang Zheng stared blankly at this scene. Originally, he was extremely confident in the 6 directions, 8 desolation array. After all, this was an extremely powerful array, and with the activation of the Heaven and Earth Profound Stone, it should be impregnable and unbreakable. Once the 6 directions, 8 desolation array was broken, Tang Zheng knew that something was wrong. If the powerful black lightning landed on the Tree of Life, it would definitely harm it. His worries were immediately fulfilled. Another loud sound came from the sky, and then a thick black lightning bolt descended, directly striking towards the Tree of Life. Tang Zheng roared. He stepped forward and waved the war soul sword in his hand, soaring into the sky like a slowly rising red sun. The sword light that erupted from the war soul sword completely enveloped Tang Zheng, and the man and sword became one, going against the flow. Boom! The lightning fell on Tang Zheng's body, and the thick lightning turned into small lightning bolts. It was like a giant python that had hatched many young snakes. They slithered around and entangled Tang Zheng. His sword had indeed scattered the lightning, but it did not destroy it. Instead, it caused the lightning to turn from whole to zero and become omnipresent. He let out a heart-wrenching cry, mixed with pain, because those lightning bolts were actually trying to drill into his skin. These lightning bolts all contained extremely strange power. If they were allowed to enter the body, it would definitely be harmful to the person. Therefore, he activated his true chi and the holy armor shield. With a sword in one hand and a shield in the other, he resisted the strange black lightning. Pa pa pa! The electric current continued to flow through his body. Tang Zheng's entire body trembled, but he still gritted his teeth and forcefully activated his true chi, as if he was trying to force the lightning back. However, these lightning bolts were extremely strange and powerful. The true chi was actually unable to force them back. They seemed to be able to break through Tang Zheng's defense and invade his body. Suddenly, Tang Zheng saw the whirlpool in the sky from the corner of his eyes. It seemed to be brewing lightning again. He shouted, "Crap!" The lightning in front of him had not been dealt with yet, and now there was another bolt of lightning. Wasn't this trying to kill him? Boom! As expected, after a loud sound, the lightning descended. It was as if it wanted to turn him into a piece of charcoal. "If you want to kill me, I'll fight you to the death." Tang Zheng roared and gave up on the holy armor shield. In any case, it would not be able to block this strange lightning. He stretched out his hand and directly grabbed at the lightning. However, he did not completely lose his mind, nor was he seeking death. Instead, he had an idea and activated the sky swallowing technique. The sky swallowing technique could devour everything. He wondered if it would work on this black lightning. A black hole appeared in his palm. His hand was like an antenna, firmly attracting the lightning's attention. All the lightning bolts struck his hand at once. The scene of Tang Zheng being turned into charcoal was not what he had imagined. He was safe and sound. He raised his hand as if he was a hero who had sacrificed himself for justice. He was stunned for a moment and stared blankly at his intact hand. Joy gradually spread in the depths of his eyes. He was so surprised that he almost jumped up and cheered. "Haha, lightning, aren't you very powerful? Come on, I'm not afraid of you anymore." Seeing that the lightning on his body was still running around, Tang Zheng hurriedly aimed his palm at those small lightning bolts. It was like a huge vacuum cleaner, and these lightning bolts were like dust. In the blink of an eye, they were sucked in and disappeared. He relaxed and looked up at the sky. He pointed at the black whirlpool and shouted, "Come on, I'll teach you a lesson." Chapter 955. Looking at the black lightning in the sky, the Empyrean fairy asked worriedly, "Are you sure you can deal with it?" "Tang Zheng, don't try to be brave. This isn't a game. It's a matter of life and death." Tian Chanzi also reminded him. Tang Zheng wasn't completely sure, but he was willing to give it a try. After all, he had experienced the power of the sky-devouring technique, so he chose to take a gamble. "I'll give it a try. All right, we'll be by your side. If anything goes wrong, we'll take action," Tian Chanzi said with a dignified expression. The Empyrean fairy didn't say a word, but it was obvious that she had the same plan. This was undoubtedly a huge gamble. If Tang Zheng's judgment was wrong, and the lightning was too powerful, Tian Chanzi and the Empyrean fairy wouldn't be able to save him in time. Then, Tang Zheng would be blasted into ashes by the lightning. He took a deep breath. His heart was in his throat, and he looked up at the sky. Rumble! With a deafening sound, the python-like lightning fell. Tang Zheng raised his hands and silently used the sky-devouring technique. Immediately, two black holes appeared in his palms. He kept urging his power, and the black holes in his palms grew bigger and bigger. Suddenly, the air above his hands fluctuated violently, and circles of ripples appeared. The air gradually turned black and finally turned into a huge black hole. At this moment, the lightning struck and fell into the black hole. Whoosh! The black hole flashed, and the lightning disappeared. It was as if it had never appeared, and there was no trace of it. Tang Zheng stared blankly at this scene. Just now, he had desperately urged the sky-devouring technique. He had a feeling that the sky-devouring technique was showing signs of a breakthrough. His sky-devouring technique had been stuck at the second level of absorption. Now that it showed signs of breaking through to the third level of soul-devouring, how could he not be surprised? The sky-devouring technique is really extraordinary. It's amazing. Tang Zheng couldn't help but praise. The Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi also looked at this scene in surprise. The sky-devouring technique was a little out of the ordinary, and they were completely surprised. At that moment, the two of them no longer dared to underestimate this set of spells. With a thought from Tang Zheng, The huge black hole did not disappear. Instead, it faced the sky as if it was mocking the lightning for overestimating itself. Roar! Another angry roar came from the vortex. The color of the vortex became darker and darker, and the black clouds rolled. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the black clouds. The black cloud continued to spread downwards like a flight of stairs descending from the sky and landing on top of everyone's heads. This was a ferocious ghost head. 2 balls of ghostly fire burned in its hollow eyes. It was blue and extremely terrifying. He was very tall, at least a few meters tall. He looked down at the 3 of them with an awe-inspiring aura. "What is this?" Tang Zheng cried out in surprise. Back then, he had never seen such a behemoth in the ghost realm. "You humans are so bold. How dare you absorb the original energy of our ghost realm? We will destroy your human world." The ferocious ghost opened its mouth and roared angrily like thunder. The Empyrean fairy had been looking at this behemoth coldly. After listening to his words, she retorted, "Don't make the ghost realm sound so righteous. Back then, the human world was a big world, and your ghost realm was just a small world attached to the human world. Now, your ghost realm has become a big world, and the human world has become a small world. Isn't it obvious enough?" Tang Zheng had never thought of this problem, but it was indeed a fact. Tian Chanzi also nodded subconsciously. The transformation of the human world and the ghost realm had happened in the past few hundred years. It was impossible to say that the ghost realm did not do anything. Tian Chanzi muttered to himself and agreed. That makes sense. So, all of this is what the ghost realm brought upon itself. We're just taking back what originally belonged to us. The ghost was stunned for a moment. It seemed that it did not expect that there would be people in the human world who could see so clearly. The flames in its eyes jumped up and down. Its empty eyes stared at the 3 of them and asked, "Who are you people? How do you know these things? If you don't want people to know, don't do it in the first place. Moreover, this is not a profound matter. You can get the answer with a little analysis." The Empyrean fairy said indifferently, "So what if you know? Now that you dare to do this, we will kill you and flatten the human world." The ghost said arrogantly. Tang Zheng had been silent. When he heard this, he sneered, "Flatten the human world? What a big tone." The ghost's eyes turned, and the flames in its pupils were aimed at Tang Zheng. It said, "With your strength, you dare to challenge our ghost realm. You really don't know life from death. Is that so? Then I'll deal with you first." Tang Zheng did not have a good impression of the ghost realm. Back then, he still lost a shooting sun arrow in the ghost realm. He had thought of going back to get it, but he never had the opportunity. Now that he met this rude ghost, he naturally started with it. Whoosh! The tip of his foot lightly tapped on the branch. The branch bent down and suddenly bounced back. He held War Soul and flew towards the ghost. He could not see through the ghost's real situation, so he decided to explore the path first. Whoosh! A heaven-flying, immortal sword technique pierced towards the ghost. The ghost stood on the black cloud and roared. Its sharp claws like a beast slapped towards Tang Zheng. Pong! The claws hit the War Soul, but there were no sparks. Only black gas splashed out from the claws, and a gap appeared. Then, it quickly repaired itself and returned to normal. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted. He thought to himself that it could actually repair itself. This was similar to the ability of the Blood Clan. However, he did not stop there. He skillfully attacked with a few sharp sword moves. These moves are divided into top, bottom, left, and right, respectively attacking different parts of the ghost. The ghost's body was huge, but its movements were very agile. Its claws were like weapons, perfectly receiving the attack of War Soul. Of course, the power of War Soul was not to be underestimated. It cut off a few of the ghost's fingers. When the fingers left his body, they immediately turned into a ball of black gas and transformed into a ferocious ghost head. It merged into his body, and the fingers quickly grew out. Huh! Tang Zheng was secretly shocked. What was going on? The Empyrean fairy silently watched the battle. When she saw the fingers transform into ghost head, her eyes lit up and shouted, "I finally understand. Tang Zheng, this ghost is not a real body, but a condensation of countless ghosts. So, even if you cut it into 4 or 5 pieces, it can quickly reassemble and recover. Is it really like this? It's all condensed from ghosts?" Tang Zheng was shocked. He stared at the ghost, but did not find any clues. When the ghost heard this, the flames in its eyes jumped a few times. It was obvious that she had seen through its thoughts. It looked at the Empyrean fairy in shock. The flames in its eyes jumped, and its face was ferocious and unkind. Since the Empyrean fairy can see through it, then it must be right. It is condensed from ghosts. It will not be so easy to completely defeat it. Although he said this, Tang Zheng did not retreat. Instead, he desperately urged the war soul. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind. The third move of the Tai Chi Yin Yang sword technique appeared. He was overjoyed at the unexpected good news. Without even thinking, he used it in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. Tens of thousands of sword light burst out from the war soul. In an instant, the ghost was torn into pieces by the sword light, turning into pieces. However, when the sword light disappeared, the pieces immediately turned into black smoke. Then, they turned into ferocious ghost heads. They fused together at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, the huge ferocious ghost appeared again. The three of them witnessed this scene with their own eyes. They were amazed. This was simply an undying monster. How could they fight it? Tang Zheng scratched his head. He was also very distressed. He turned to look at Tian Chanzi and the Empyrean fairy. The two of them nodded in tacit understanding and said, "We will help you." With the help of 2 experts, the situation of the battle changed in an instant. This ghost's strength was indeed very strong. Moreover, it became stronger when faced with a strong opponent. It turned out that when it fought with Tang Zheng, it did not use its full strength. One could only see its hand grab the void. A black lightning immediately formed in its hand. The lightning crackled, and the power was extraordinary. Just now, the lightning was actually controlled by it. In an instant, its 2 hands grabbed 2 lightning bolts. These 2 lightning bolts were like 2 whips, but they were even more powerful. They constantly flashed with black lightning and sizzled. Whoosh! The ghost waved the lightning whip. Wherever the lightning whip passed, the air was like the sea. The lightning whip carried a terrifying power and lashed out at Tian Chanzi and the Empyrean fairy. The 2 of them did not dare to be careless. They simultaneously took out their magic weapons. When Heaven Monk first obtained the Tai sword, he was in high spirits. Activating his innate chi, he used the flying immortal sword. Shua, the Tai sword flew out, drawing a beautiful sword light, welcoming the lightning whip. Punk! The sword light and the lightning bolt collided and burst out a dazzling light. However, no one could do anything to the other. Tian Chanzi was not willing to give up. The ghost was even more unwilling. Both of them launched a second round of attacks at the same time. The Tai sword and the lightning whip occupied more than half of the sky, leaving behind countless shadows and lights. It was earth-shattering. Rumble. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. The ghost was multitasking. On one hand, it fought Tian Chanzi. On the other hand, it waved the lightning whip to attack the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy was calm. Although she knew that the opponent was strong, her heart was still as water. Step by step, she calmly received the attack. As soon as the stately painting appeared, a gust of wind blew from it, forming a small tornado. It was like a whip entangled with a lightning whip. They fought like a tug of war. The ghost did not panic at all. It also dealt with the attacks as they came. A black gas surged out of its body and entered the tornado. Suddenly, the tornado turned black. A few ghost heads flashed faintly inside. Boom! With an explosion, the tornado was torn apart. The ghost heads proudly floated up, as if mocking the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy coldly snorted. "You're courting death." With a thought, a huge whirlpool appeared on the stately painting. The suction force increased, and the air was immediately sucked into the painting. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.